And water efficiency has been instilled as a community value. However, there's always potential for a worse drought, and there's always possibility of imposed water restrictions from the state or from Bear Creek. In the event of a drought today, we'd probably be able to reduce our projected water use by 10%. This is great, but not enough to guarantee drought resilience. So, our answer to this is twofold. First, public utilities invested in our future water supply in 2020. We invested in the Rock Hill Quarry as a future reservoir. With royalties and the lease, we've made $2.25 million revenues to date. We're estimating $8 million by 2030, and that's when the lease with Hansen ends. Secondly, we invested in recycled water. We're planning on $20 million at North Oconee Water Reclamation Facility in improvements like clarifiers for water filtering. We're in the middle of constructing the raw water pump station, and we've already spent $7 million in purple pipe in the ground along Firefly Trail and the GDOT project next to the loop in Lexington Road. When we calculate demand of future water use, we first have to consider population projections. And the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget forecasts that our population will increase almost 40% by the year 2065. That is not far away. They're projecting 200,000 residents. Additionally, EPD sets a permit limit during drought. Right now, our permit limit is 25.5 million gallons per day. Our percentage of Bear Creek safe yield is 12.3 million gallons per day. And safe yield just means a conservative number of the safest amount of water to use during drought. When we look at the reservoir, we estimate it could double our safe yield in a drought. And we came up with two options. The first option is get the reservoir online and stop mining in 2030. The second option is get the reservoir online and continue mining in 2030. The first option, bear with me, the map's kind of sideways. North is headed to your right. So in 2030, we'll bring the reservoir online all the way up to the estimated elevation of 720 feet. That will give us 4.3 billion gallons of capacity. That's great. That brings our system safe yield up to 28.5 million gallons per day. However, it will not sustain demand beyond 2050. Our second option looks a little complicated, but I'll walk you through it. In option 2, on the left, in 2030, we would begin filling the reservoir up to about 510 feet. That would give us an estimated additional capacity of 1 billion gallons, raising our system safe yield to 21.7 million gallons per day. That will sustain a drought, any drought we have through 2045. Continuing on, we will allow mining to keep going through 2045. And based on our calculations, if we fill that quarry up in 2045, up to 720 feet, we'll have an additional 8.2 billion gallons of capacity. That will sustain our drought well beyond 2050 for future residents. The other impact we have when we close the quarry has to do with our carbon footprint and freight costs. Hansen Aggregates provides all the materials for building in the Athens-Clarke County area. Currently, most trucks travel an average of 3 miles to the quarry. When we close the quarry, the closest one is 18 miles away in Walton County. If we utilize this quarry, our carbon footprint is increased 6 times over, and freight will increase 30%. Our recommendation is to extend the lease and allow multi-phasing operations at the quarry from 2030 through 2045. This means we can plan to have the quarry online in use in 2030. We'll continue to have a reduced carbon footprint, lower freight and fuel fees during this phase. We can extend the lease so that by 2045 we have a larger capacity, 8.2 billion gallons, which gives us 400 extra days of supply during a drought. Additionally, the investment we've put into the quarry, by 2045 we will have paid it back. If approved, we'll begin preliminary planning, which includes best management practices for dual purpose operations, evaluating how to bring the quarry online, and also investigating the future recreational uses in that area. All right, recycled water, purple pipe.
Should we ask questions if we had questions on the rock quarry part before? I don't know. That's up to you.
You can now or
Yeah,
later?
we can do that. We have a nice small
Okay.
Just we
group
don't
here.
have to jump.
Yes, sir.
So, and we talked about this a little bit, and I know this has been brought up somewhat, but can you speak to any health concerns for like water quality and stuff if we were to go option 2 and allow mining to continue while we're using it as a reservoir?
Absolutely. We have no idea. That's why we are getting help with best management practices. Our consultant believes it can be done, but we will not move forward if it's not an option.
Okay.
So,
All right. That's.
okay.
I like that honest answer. Yeah.
She said it best. There have been reservoirs that operate a dual purpose, so we would need to evaluate our particular one to make sure.
Okay. And then my other question, which I think maybe I figured out, but just in case, I'll go ahead and ask. So it talks about the. So if you go to the option 2 slide with the maps.
Sorry. I'm on one of the oldest computers. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I think my answer is that I'm assuming the MGD is that millions of gallons per day or what was that? Yeah.
Yes.
That's
Man,
correct.
look at that. I should be a scientist. So with that, I see that the capacity is going in the 2030 to 2045 from well, I'm assuming it's 1 billion gallons to 8.2 billion gallons.
Yes.
Okay.
We estimate, yes.
Yet the MGD is only going up 10 million gallons per day. Can you explain why the estimated capacity is going up more than 8 times, yet we're not seeing that same increase on the MGD?
Go back to the previous slide.
And I'm assuming that's because maybe the MGD is including Bear Creek Reservoir, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
That's correct. If you look at the option 1, which is filling it up all the way to 2030, it's 4.3 million or 4.3 billion. But if you look at it, the next option, it doesn't include filling it all the way up to 720. So that's what the limit is. We either get the 4.3 billion or the 8.2. The other one, option 2, is where we can operate it still, but it won't be filled. So we won't be able to safely yield or use that flow.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. The safety, yeah.
If you look at the map to the left, it's only going to be filled up to 500 feet. That's why a
Right.
lower capacity.
Right. It was more so the confusion was that when it goes to 2045, that it goes to 8.2 BG
Yeah.
And I guess I just assumed that the MGD would go up eightfold also, but, but I guess it's like you said, it's what's safely able to be used, so.
Yes.
That's
Thank you.
correct.
Got it.
Commissioner Hool?
Thanks, yeah. Thanks a lot for being here, y'all. I know that it's past regular work hours, and this is really encouraging. I mean, this is a great example of where I think staff has spearheaded some things that are visionary and looking generations out, which is helpful because, you know, sometimes we're really caught up in the short term. I have, as encouraged as I am about this, I have a couple of maybe like climate fear-based questions for you. So the first is, I've been reading a lot about how what's happening out west in this country, which continues to be described as drought, and where policies and things in place are being described as drought, would really be better described as aridification. And so, you know, there's like a need for a shift, hopefully a rapid shift in policy, where we don't think of these things as temporary droughts, but rather permanent changes in water supply. Is that something that we're also facing here in the Southeast, or is that more just a problem for the western side of the country?
We're not at that point yet, but I think our predecessors have set it up that we don't have to do that with this rock quarry. I think before that we were very close, but I think purchase of the rock quarry with the help of American Missions has made that possible where we don't have them kind of droughts. That was the whole purpose of buying that, to eliminate that.
If I could, Commissioner Hull, so what climate change is showing us is that these events are probably going to be more frequent in the future. The Bear Creek Reservoir is a regional asset and shared with 3 other counties. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, we had a lawsuit by Jackson County against the rest of the ownership about how much of that water was theirs. And so, and the third thing I would say is, as Sheridan mentioned, in 2007, we were within 30 days of running out of water. And I'm not sure an average person can translate what that looks like. And what that looks like is that those would be across the board water restrictions on our industry, our commercial. I mean, normally when we try and dip in and save a few gallons here and there, it's with some irrigation restrictions, which, you know, that's inconvenient at best for some, and people get upset about it. But when you talk about a market change in the economy is when you start restricting industry water. And we were within 30 days of that, which is really scary. So those types of things have led us in the commission to, you know, wanting to go with the quarry. And I will say that we really want to put on our 100-year glasses when we're looking at this. And so we went for the quarry for 50 years, right? That was a 50-year, and when the Hanson Aggregates came back and said, well, there's a way that we can give you some water capacity in the near term with the promise of an even larger volume if we were patient, which can serve our needs even further beyond that. That's really the value proposition in all this. If you would.
That's correct.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, I'm open to option 2, just with the assurances that the water quality is properly accounted for, you know, while simultaneous operation. So, thanks.
Commissioner Hool, you had another question? I'll
Yeah, and
finish up.
I feel similar to Commissioner Edwards there. Yeah, I guess looking at that population slide, and I'm glad that Manager Williams brought up, you know, that this is a regional asset. You know, that figure is just for ACC, correct? The 200K by 2060.
Yes.
Do we have a figure for the region that's dependent on that water supply?
I don't.
Okay.
The quarry is owned by us. I'm not sure if we're going to do anything regionally.
Okay.
Well, so
Great question.
so Bear Creek, there are hard allocations in there, and there's a methodology for what each member county gets. And for some of the other counties, this is their primary source of water. In fact, if you didn't know, the other 3 counties actually have shared the cost of a treatment plant on site at Bear Creek. We did not participate in that, but rather we transport the water through pipe to Beecham and we treat it there. So this is the primary source where we're seeing a lot of growth in Barrow County and, you know, in Oconee County. So those demands are only going up.
Yeah, and thinking about that and thinking about what our backstops are, I hope that maybe moving forward, if that data is not already accessible in an easy way, if we can try to find some way to be collecting regional projections when we're talking about things that are regional resources. Because regardless of what our population is, if the population that's dependent on that water supply has a greater need, then that's going to have an effect on how much we can access, how big that pie is that we get our percentage of. And I'd also be curious to learn, I'm assuming you don't have this on hand, but just I'm thinking about whose office is funding that study, and I'm curious about how well they're thinking about the impacts of climate change long-term and the likely shifts in population moving away from the coast. And so, when we're making a 100-year plan, I'm curious how much these population predictions are taking into account factors that I think are currently frequently overlooked. And I just don't know when I see 200K whether whoever came up with that number was thinking about how many people will still be living in Savannah in 2070. So.
Sure, yeah, thank you.
So what's interesting about Athens, at least traditionally, is that, and we just had a onboarding with the newer commissioners with planning, and Assistant Director Bruce Lonnie shared this today, that Athens has been clocking along about 1% a year of population. It's been pretty steady all along. Another thing that I'm encouraged by is that our planners, they used as a geographic unit water basins to project population. So now we're tying population to, water need. And so we feel pretty good about this. Wholesale shifts of demographics from certain urban areas to others is not accounted for. But thus far, we've been pretty consistent and are very close in the projections. Of course, obviously the further you go out, the more squirrely it gets.
Yeah.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I want to thank staff for all the massive amount of hard work that's put into this. This is a really innovative solution to not just potential future problems, but definite future problems if we look at what's going on in other parts of the country and the world. And I think that we kind of got an idea of this proposal when we toured the quarry last spring, which was a really fascinating and fun tour. So I really look forward to seeing this whole project play out. I hope I'm around when it does.
Keep eating your vegetables, Commissioner.
Me too. Yes.
Commissioner Denson?
I know you have on here, it says that option 2 will sustain through beyond 2050. Do y'all, in y'all's modeling, do y'all have an actual year of when we feel like this will see us through in the modeling that you've done?
We have not
Okay.
past 2050.
Okay, cool, that's fine.
When we do the 2025 service delivery update, we
Mhm.
always do a water supply study or, and so we'll go probably to 2065 or maybe beyond.
Okay, so we'll kind of get that information then. All right,
Yes.
fantastic.
Couple
Well,
of years.
I mean, yeah, I am also, I think option 2 makes a lot of sense, as long as it comes back that it's something safe for us to do, but, I mean, we've said it before, but kudos to y'all coming up with this and the manager's office pulling this off. It's pretty amazing. I mean, I think government works best whenever the constituents don't notice. They don't, because there's not a problem when they're just happy. And I think this is one of those things that it should be front page news that this is happening, because it's going to save people's lives and jobs and homes and stuff. But yeah, great job.
Great.
Thank you.
And then on to section 2, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you might remember Frank and Marilyn, they had some input. All right, I'm going to move on to recycled water. Currently, in our ordinance, recycled water, and we used to call it reuse, we now call it recycled water. The rate is 50% of a Tier 1 potable rate, or our drinking water rate. So right now, if a recycled water customer came to us, we would charge them $3.13. This was approved in 2020. We took a look at the rates, and we took two things into account. We want to finance our investments. We want to pay it back. We want to pay down our investments with these rates. But we also want to attract the big users of non-potable water, our local industries. This is another leg or fork for us to address increasing demand in drought conditions. So again, we want to attract industries. We assumed a conservative customer demand beginning in fiscal year '25. We assumed that one customer would come online each year at 90,000 gallons demand per year. This, when we looked at the return, we said, okay, our window of time would be 10 to 15 years. Because again, we've spent about $25 million at our North Oconee plant and putting pipe in the ground. We came up with two structures. The first is called a unit rate, where we would charge a flat rate per volume. The second rate would be a fixed fee plus the unit rate. So here's a visual of a customer coming on each line, coming online each year at 90,000 gallons. We estimate demand would include UGA and the Athena industrial area. And the total 8 additional customers through 2033 would increase or would demand a capacity of 3.7 million gallons per day by 2031. Sorry, there's a lot of numbers. So let's look at the first rate structure, which is a straight volumetric rate. That means we would charge the same rate per 1,000 gallons. A rate of $2.67 gives us an average of $3.7 million revenue each year, and that's the purple bar. We're paying down our blue bar of expenses, and those are shown each year, and the gray line is showing the balance of what we're trying to pay off. Based on this study, we will pay our investments down to $3.7 million using this rate. This rate also puts the burden on our enterprise and capital reserves and any alternate funding to continue paying off expenses. The second rate structure is a fixed fee per year based on the meter size. And the unit rate would be added on top of that based on volume. The unit rate here is $2.40. It's a lower rate, but it puts the burden on customers and any new users that tie on in the future. And based on these, we would be able to pay down to just under $4 million by 2033. Our recommendation is to go with the first straight volumetric rate of $2.67. It's a 57% saving of our Tier 1 potable rate, which is what they're using now. And again, it brings us down to $3.7 million, pay down our investment. And it puts the burden on us to find alternate funding and capital funding. So I'm going to summarize our two recommendations unless someone has questions about recycled water rates.
Why don't you go do your summary, and then we'll take the questions.
All right, thank you. So I just want to say again, we're committed to environmental stewardship, protection of health and local economic vitality today and in the future. And we're really lucky here to have these opportunities to provide what our community needs and continue to offer sustainable water resiliency. And I'm excited about these opportunities. Again, we're recommending that we bring the quarry online in 2030, but continue mining. EPA is not going to let us do anything without their go-ahead, so we will look at best practices if you approve this. We'll have a larger reservoir capacity. And then our rate option is, we're recommending $2.67 straight unit rate based on volume to attract new customers and then divert our potable water demand and pay down our investment through the next 10 to 15 years. And thank you. And there you are.
Commissioners, do we have any questions on this part two?
Recommendation sounds good.
Okay.
Thank
Great.
you so much, Sheridan. and
Thank you all.
I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Were you all like
Okay.
scrolling through who was going to attend and then picking the photo that had
Thank you.
Giant.
Hi, how are you?
I was a little late too. I was waiting for Charles to get home in the car.
Yep, just gotta get it in the hole.
So exciting.
Wrong slot.
Okay, next up, we have Derek Doster, who will be speaking on the SPLOST 2020 Project 22, the broadband connectivity. And he'll be ready to go in a sec here. Perfect timing.
Thank you, everybody. We've got Travis Cooper here with our IT department and our consultants, Foresight Group, and we're going to turn it over and let the professionals take care of it.
Well, good evening. Thank you for allowing our team to present the SPLOST 2020 Broadband Connectivity Enhancement Project. We're here to present the results of the demand aggregation survey with the proposed project concept recommendation. In addition, we will share some of the history, project milestones, and next steps. And we can also try to answer any questions that you may have. So I will blow through this history. In November 5th, 2019, our Athens-Clarke County voters approved the SPLOST project. June 30th, 2021, the user group approved the proposed project alternative analysis that you subsequently approved, which allowed us to seek a telecommunications firm to help guide us through this project, so we could address all of the broadband connectivity needs in Athens-Clarke County. On January 4th, we brought Foresight Group on board to help with this. And then on August 12th, 2022, we opened up a broadband demand aggregation survey, which really asked our community, do you have broadband? And tell us about it. And so the Foresight Group will go into more detail on that survey, as well as some of the information gleaned from all those results. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley Ball with the Foresight Group.
Thank you, Travis. Good evening. My name is Ashley Ball, and I am a program manager within our broadband engineering practice area at Foresight Group. And I have with me today Lee Comer, who is our practice area leader for the broadband engineering practice area. So as Travis said, Foresight Group was brought in to help consult on the broadband status within Athens-Clarke County. The network expansion goal was to implement strategies to enhance broadband and internet connectivity throughout Athens-Clarke County. So our team went through and did some research about the county to better understand what some of the developments had been, and also understand the needs of the county. One of the things we were able to see is how diverse the occupation and industry is of the county, as well as seeing that there has been consistent growth within the county. Now, a big part, and something that we've heard a lot in the news lately, is broadband. It's a very broad term. A lot of people connect this with internet. That is how most people think of broadband. Now, it goes way beyond that, but for most residents, broadband and internet is what they're thinking of. So we have a few maps for you to look at today. On the left side is the FCC, which is the federal commission who they regulate internet, broadband, telecommunications. Their map on the left will show the county and will show the fiber access. The orange shows where fiber is not currently provided, and the green shows where it is. Now, this information is based off of two things. Number one, it is provided by internet service providers. So they report this information to the FCC, and that is how this map is being compiled. And the second is that it is on the census block level. So, there's been a lot of critical feedback on this map that the FCC has done. One being that the census block level can be a little deceiving, because if any one person in that census block level reports that they have a certain speed or internet speed, that gets reported for the whole census block. So sometimes if your neighbor has a certain speed but you don't, this would show that your whole census block has it. Now, on the right side, this is the Georgia broadband map. Now, this is a little bit more granular. It's at the address level, but again, it's based off of information that's provided by internet service providers. And what you can really see on these two, and one more thing on the Georgia broadband map, it's looking at broadband as a whole. So it's not looking at just fiber, it's looking at any type of internet connection. And what we can see is that, of course, on this kind of the outer edges of the county is where connectivity is struggling the most, which usually makes sense. As you move away from the core, things get a little bit more rural. It tends to be pretty common that those areas are lacking connectivity. So as Travis stated earlier, our team issued a demand aggregation survey to the community. Now, this survey asks questions such as, do you have internet? What do you use your internet for? Are you satisfied with your internet speed, the price that you're paying? It was to help our team understand the internet and broadband needs of the community. Now, there's several colors on this map. What this indicates is where we received survey responses from, and we had about 950 responses on this. And if you see a green dot, that indicates that at the end of the survey, we had the residents run a speed test, and this would tell us how fast is their internet. The green shows that they are served, so this is the most ideal level that we'd want to see the community at. The red dots show unserved, so this would be less than 25.3 megabits. And then the yellow dots falls right in between the two. They are classified as underserved. Now, on the right map, on the right side of the screen, this is the same information as the left, but what we've done is also add in the government facilities. Those are your purple inverted triangles that you see. And one thing our team did as we were going through is we did find this transportation corridor concept map. And one thing we thought was very interesting on this, and is something that we would want to propose, is the map is already showing on the transportation plan extending to those edges of the county that are also lacking high-speed internet and broadband connectivity. And so one thing that we often look at, and we would do this in the next phase of the project, is how to try to overlap those projects to reduce cost, which is always nice to hear. Another thing our team did was look at the 2018 comprehensive plan, and we're able to see how several of the key government needs and goals broadband could help achieve. So we looked at government needs, public safety needs, telehealth needs, education, local business, and community needs. Now, hearing that our network expansion goal is to implement strategies to enhance broadband or internet connectivity throughout Athens-Clarke County, we really want to state what we need. This is going to be a few things. We're looking at a backbone for municipal networks, and the easiest way to think about this is it's a ring that would connect the government facilities. We want to serve anchor institutions. Now, this could be schools, library, hospitals, fire departments. These are our key service areas that support the community and provide key services to the community. We want to expand partnership opportunities, and we want to also look at partnering with third-party ISPs, which ISP is Internet Service Provider. We often call those ISPs, to facilitate a middle mile. And again, a middle mile is going to connect usually your government facilities, and a last mile. A last mile is where you're getting the internet service to the residents. Now, this is going to show our top 3 priorities. Now, these priorities are a little bit different because they don't go in your standard 1, 2, then 3 format. They're going to be a little bit more linear and run parallel in a sense. So the key priorities we're looking at is developing a backbone, or again, the middle mile, for ACC-Gov network. And the reason that we're looking at this is that with any community, to make sure that your residents are served and getting the best, we have to make sure that the government facilities are supported. And that includes having internet access, trying to keep internet loss that impacts the community when that happens. And it's really, if we can connect the government facilities, it's going to help support the community's needs. The second priority is going to be expand partnership opportunities. And this is where we really want to explore some smart city initiatives. We're going to look at how to support those anchor institutes that we talked about and things of that nature. And then the third priority is to support the residents and businesses of Athens-Clarke County. And we're going to be able to do that by potentially partnering with third-party internet service providers to facilitate both that middle mile and last mile connectivity. Now, one thing our team did is we asked, through our research and through talking through key members of both the government and of the community, we wanted to overlay and show some of the key facilities that we spotted for the government. This includes landfills, fire departments, things of that nature. And these are going to be either kind of key to the day-to-day running of the county, or areas that really are lacking the strong internet connection that they currently need. And what we can see is that in several of these locations, it's really overlapping with needs of the community as well. And especially when we look at something like the landfill, which is on a little bit farther out, or some of the water treatment plants, if we can connect to those facilities, it helps us connect even farther to the residents as well. And then what we did on this, just to help with visuals, is these red polygons that we're seeing. That's the overlaying from that transportation map that we looked at earlier. So again, we're already trying to reach the edges of the county with the transportation plan. And if we can team up and implement a broadband plan as well, and if we can overlap some of those projects, it again can help reduce cost of construction and things of that nature. And I'm going to hand this budget slide back over to Derek.
Yes, this is our traditional budget concept, and what is important here is that of course, the 6.3 million in revenues that is provided by the SPLOST effort. I apologize for the orientation here on the schedule, but when we drop down to the things that we normally need for design, testings, furniture fixings, contingency. One of the things that we drop down to, you see, we've got the available 3.7 million, and it says construction and for grant fundings, and that's the important part. Is if, for example, tonight, or as we progressed, if you said we want you to go build something with the money that we have, we know we can only reach a certain component of the community in a small amount. But this grant money, and the team will come back up and help us understand the next round of grant funds, is really trying to parlay this dollar amount into connecting with some of those providers, which also get us to that next level of federal grant money, which really kind of can, I'm going to use the term explode, because it really would make a difference on the amount of money that we could pull into the community to make it worthwhile for everybody, not just a few parcels here and there. And this is our project milestones, and I'll ask Ashley to come back up to understand some of the application deadlines. But quickly, we are here tonight. We've done phase 1 for the project milestones and the project concept. Of course, again, it's kind of priority levels at the project concepts. It's not the traditional, we want to build X, Y, Z like you would at a master plan of a park. But these overall tenets of what we want to do help us lead down to the next phases. And I'll ask Ashley to kind of explain that.
Commissioner Hull, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just had a question about the grants that you were speaking to, Derek. I mean, you know, about half this money, close to it, is designated for things. Can the grants not be used to help with the cost of design, for example, or the cost of FF&E? You know, some of these things that are eating up some of that designation.
It can, I mean, but I'm gonna go back to this one. It can, but if we moved all that down to the matching funds or the construction funds, you know, we only have, we're not expanding our dollar footprint very much here. And so what we're trying to do is take this $3 or $4 million and get that ISP provider or the traditional partner in and add, you know, $10, $12 million. Then all of a sudden, the grant that we're going to talk about, well, is a 75-25 matching. And so all of a sudden, you're going from a $3 or $4 million project, if you multiply that out, versus getting our $3 or $4 million, putting $10, $12 million, $15 million on it from a local provider that's partnering. And then all of a sudden now you're probably talking about an $80 to $100 million project. So we're really trying to volumize it up. That's not a word, I know, but try to bring that up to a large project dollar amount that you can really reach out and see people.
Okay, so spending money on design ourselves is helping us get better grants. Is that essentially what I'm hearing?
I will tell you, spending money on design and having these people in our room helping us develop those applications and how to develop those applications are the only way to go after those dollars. That is a key component of having the right people, knowing how to do it and what to do it.
It's the difference between hastily scrambling to put something together and having a very well thought out plan.
Yeah. Okay. Next.
Go ahead, finish up, and
Oh,
I'll ask
sorry.
my question at the end.
So as Derek said, we're currently in phase 1 of the project, the community engagement. And again, this is where our team can better understand the county, understand what the residents and the government needs. And we did that through a strategy session at the end of June, where we met with, invited several members to come and listen to what the project was, what we would be doing, and what the goals were. We also did the demand aggregation, where we reached out to the community and asked for their feedback and their input about their current experience with internet and broadband. And then we did our business case needs assessment, where we really looked to see what does the county need, what do the residents need, and what's the best way forward with that. Now, upcoming, we do have a funding milestone for one of the grants that Derek was referring to, which is, we call it the BEAD program, because saying the whole name is a mouthful. It is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or again, the BEAD program. Now, we talked about the FCC map earlier and how there's a lot of people that's been critical of it, that it could definitely be improved. So the FCC is currently working on releasing a new map. Now, the original date of that was to be released in November, but we've not currently heard exactly a specific date that we expect that to come out. Again, this is still going to be information provided by the service providers, but it'll be very much updated, more than what the current one shows. Now, this date is important because it's what kicks off the timeline to put in the BEAD application. And we're looking at that to be a 180-day window is what that looks at. So it could get pushed out a little bit, but again, the last we heard, it's supposed to still be in November. So phase 2 of this project, we're estimating to be about 8 weeks, and we would be targeting December through February is when we would mainly be completing this project. This is going to be where we actually deliver a high-level route map, and it's a fancy way of saying we're developing a design. And we're going to do this by collecting data, understanding the best routes and paths to choose. We'll be able to use a lot of the information we gathered in phase 1. And we'll be able to develop a design that will show exactly the areas that we need to serve in kind of the best plan. Phase 3 would then be the business planning phase. Again, we're estimating about 8 weeks, and we would be targeting that to happen between usually February and April is what we're targeting. That's where we're going to create a schedule. We're going to determine the best service model, and that's going to mean exactly how do we want to pay for it, who owns it, who partners, things like that. And then also a pro forma, so getting down to the actual numbers of how much is it going to cost, how long will it take to pay back, things like that. And we're currently looking at the BEAD application deadline. We're estimating that to fall between May to June, but again, that will be determined by when they release the FCC map. And again, the BEAD, it's looking at $42.45 billion that's going to be available to expand high-speed internet that's primarily focused on rural America. So it's really prioritizing the unserved areas, or again, those red dots that we saw on the map earlier. And then after that, it focuses on underserved residents, or the yellow dots that we saw. I'll hand it back to Derek.
And just wrap it up, as far as our project concept, we're asking, just like at every project, we come and ask for your buy-in, and the buy-in will be the agenda report that's coming forth, is those priorities. How do we move forward? For example, we mentioned the landfill. If we can get service out to ourselves using, the landfill, we may be able to pick up a partner that comes in and either puts a tower out there, or they say, you've spent that much money to get out there, we'll pick up from that end and branch out to some of those other areas. And so that's why those priorities are there, and that's why they kind of run parallel. It's not a 1, 2, 3. They really kind of run parallel with each other, and they're overlaid. And then we'll come back again as part of that phase 2 planning. What we would want y'all to do is approve that high-level map, and that is, we're considering that as the preliminary plan effort under our normal process. And with the high-level map, what that does is gives y'all, any guidance that you need to give us at that time. And then it also provides that clarity for the team how to build out those pro formas and those application for the BEAD application. And we'll, at the time, under normal process, we'll ask for permission to apply for that BEAD application as well for that grant. And then after that, we'll see where we can go.
Questions? Commissioner Edwards?
Is that BEAD funding just sitting there waiting? It's already been appropriated?
I'll have to defer that question.
Good evening. So the BEAD dollars have already been appropriated. It is issued through the NTIA. And the way this is going to operate is the NTIA.
What's that? What's the NTIA?
The National Telecommunications and Information Administration.
Okay.
So they handle the processing of that part of the program. This is a subset of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was related back to COVID that came to the president. So the $3.1 trillion infrastructure bill, you may be familiar with that. So BEAD is a subset of that that's managed by the NTIA. They will then turn around, and each state has submitted a letter of interest. The funds will be disseminated to each state level, and in the state of Georgia, that will be managed by the Georgia Technology Authority. So Josh Hildebrandt and Jessica Simmons from that team will be managing those funds. Georgia's really done a great job managing their own map, so the NTIA is already looking at what Georgia's doing. We expect, because of Georgia's rurality, they'll be well funded through that process, splitting up that $42.5 billion across all 50 states plus the territories. Those funds, that's who the application would actually go to, is to GTA, because they will manage those dollars down to the state level.
Administer the grant, okay. And then what sort of, I was thinking about how the priority one linking the government institutions, and the thought that came to my mind was cybersecurity. What sort of more security might we enjoy by controlling our own fiber network?
Absolutely. I mean, that's definitely one of the components, and Travis, you might get him turned loose on security issues. So.
Yeah, honestly, the more that we have control over, honestly, the more that we have control over, the better. But there are threats from here to Sunday, so it could help. It may not make a difference. It wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, the priority one certainly seems like a slam dunk for me.
I
Yeah,
guess-
glad to see it.
And a very practical application. So when we think of cybersecurity, you think about being hacked or encoding, decoding, things of that nature. But if you bring it down even to more like a level 1, tier 1 aspect, when Ashley spoke about building a ring, so when you do that, you build redundancy into that network. So let's get away from even something like malicious hacking or things of that nature. If you have a tornado come through and take out a section of fiber, or somebody hits it with a backhoe, because you've built a redundant, diverse ring, you've got automated switching built in, so your service never goes down. I know that's something most communities suffer from outages. This is outage mitigation.
And if I might, and Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in all cases, whatever system that we have would be a hybrid of both our own fiber and fiber that we lease from others. Is that right?
That is correct. Even today, we're kind of in a hybrid mode. We have internet connectivity from major ISPs. We have redundant connections. And then between our locations, we have a mix of direct connect, fiber access, and then there's other facilities that we have to rely on the ISPs to provide internet connectivity to, and then we have secure links between. But as I mentioned, there's not much redundancy built into the network, so when something goes down, it can be quite impactful depending on where it is.
Commissioner Lake?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Edwards started to address my questions about the federal funding, and now I understand that BEAD does have to do with that Infrastructure Act that just passed a couple months ago. But I recall some of our state legislators bragging about a state broadband legislation that passed last spring or last winter. Are those grant funds available? Has any announcement been made about how that's being divvied out?
Yes, the governor's office had a portion of funds through the CARES Act that was allocated for broadband, and
Okay, so it was federal funds, it's not state funds.
correct. They administered the disbursement of that, and then as a government, we applied for that grant and did not receive any funds. However, a lot of other major ISPs did.
Okay, so with this additional funds through the Infrastructure Act that was passed thanks to our senators, is there any federal guidelines on how the state distributes it, or is it just up to the whims of the state legislator or the governor?
From my understanding, it will be a tome of information that you have to adhere to.
Okay, that's good to know. I have another question about the survey, the demand aggregation survey, the MAP. Was there an consideration of the demographics of those who responded to the survey? Does it match up with the demographics of our community?
You don't want to speak to details.
So one thing we focused on more was location, rather than, we didn't ask specifics of demographics per se outside of age. Age was the one thing we did ask, but the thing that we focused on was trying to get a pretty well dispersed throughout the county, and that way we could make sure that each area was represented. So that's where we focused a little bit more than trying to target certain areas. So our goal was just the more that we got the word out about it, and Derek and his team did a great job of sending items home through the school system, and running ads in newspapers, and so again, just all areas of the community, really.
I'd really love to see that map overlaid with a map that maybe indicates income disparities throughout the community, so we get a good idea of this infrastructure reaching low-income communities who are far less likely to even respond to these surveys, and who might be of highest need, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's a great idea. One thing we did ask within the survey was there is a current, and I apologize, the name of it slipped me, the current program. ACP, and that stands. Yeah. It's essentially a lot of providers participate in this, and it's where it helps get service to low-income areas, and specifically even the elderly. And so we did ask within the survey if they currently participated in that program or qualified for that. So we did have one question that would try to gather that information. I don't have that in my documentation that I brought today, but I can definitely get that information out.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Denson, and then Commissioner Hool.
Thank you. So I just had a couple of questions here. So we're talking about the, using that funds to go further by trying to work with some third-party providers, ISPs, to pitch in also so that the money can get the matching funds even further. I guess, what do we feel like the likelihood of that is, and like examples, I guess, of that occurring in this area? Yeah.
Well, I can't attest to the likelihood of it, but the recipients of the money are to be governments, local and city governments. And so what that does is it allows our county and city governments to partner with ISPs to collaborate our funds. So we will be the only direct recipients of that money. So we have a much greater chance of getting some funds versus the Spectrums and the AT&Ts of the world.
So we're hoping that just,
Yeah,
and opening that door for them, that they'll come through that door. Yeah.
And did you want to talk to any of the specifics of just the actual application of what all you have to have that's going to really drive it home?
Sure. So within the, within the NTIA NOFO that came out, one of the things they referenced was a pre-deployment plan. So as we talked about, when you go in and you start asking for these funds, they're going to be looking for some very specific things. And you mentioned all the regulations that will be imposed at the federal level. So they're going to be looking for what's happening in the community today. There's going to be a resistance to going in and overbuilding. This is not to go in and build where there's already good connectivity. So as we discussed earlier, there's the 3 tiers of served, underserved, and unserved, and that's what the focus is on, the unserved area. There will be additional focus on what Ashley mentioned, the ACP program. So today you may have heard something called the Lifeline program. And part of ACP is it's got certain aspects they're looking at demographically. If you're already receiving a Pell Grant, if you're already part of a federal subsidized payment plan like Lifeline, you're automatically qualified for this program, and it provides up to $30 per household per month. Right. It also includes a one-time up to $100 per household for devices. NTIA has made it very specific that they want to see this kind of participation. So in the world of this program, you can break it into access, which is building actual infrastructure, cables out to locations. There's the concept of adoption, which is where people can afford to access the service at their homes or businesses. And then there is application, which is, okay, well, I've got fiber in my neighborhood or connectivity, have got a device, but I don't know what to do with it. So supporting the community from that perspective, so they have access, they can afford it, and now they can apply the technologies to their lives. All these things do go back into the partner that the community would want to work with. So to defer back to what Derek said a few moments ago, if you come to the team and you tell us, hey, we have a specific area we want to focus on, we want to allocate these dollars, then it becomes a design platform. But what we look to go forward is, if you can take part of this funding and let that kind of be a seed funding to show that you got some skin in the game, basically, private companies will want to come in and partner with you. And when we talk about building a civic ring to connect the government facilities, that's a great jump-off point, but we really want to promote expansion beyond that. And that's where they would come alongside of that. So that public-private partnership is a key aspect of this. And from the state level and the NTIA level, they see this as partnership, which was a major buzzword. They want to see multiple partnerships, probably not just one partner, but how else can you leverage the value of that network? For instance, we talked about broadband. Some people refer to that as high-speed internet connectivity. Well, that's great, but that is just a subset. There are lots of other things that network can be utilized for, whether it's intelligent traffic systems, closed-circuit cameras, any kind of cellular connectivity. So that network has lots of different value points, revenue points, and that's going to attract that private partner to come alongside, contribute to that initial fund. And again, if we deem that the project is to go out and find a way to connect everybody in Athens-Clarke County, which is a lofty goal, that's not going to be done with the initial funds by the county. That's going to require partnership and then going and getting that federal state level grant to help augment that cost. To make sure I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did that. Thank you. I appreciate all of that. And speaking on the partners, I guess, have we have we pulled in or started communication at all with the school district at this point as a partner?
Address this?
It's part of our kind of initial conversation, they were a stakeholder, they came to our stakeholder meeting, how to implement that in the partnership. I guess from our standpoint, we kind of see them as a anchor institution. And so those conversations will continue and move forward. In the education component, those are some things we could probably do early. For example, I think at the Rural Development Conference we went to the other day that Lee and I attended, and Travis attended, I think they kind of broach it in the subject of, if most everybody's aware, like free and reduced lunch kind of programs, if you qualify one of those, that's kind of an idea or a tickler that you can say, oh, somebody may be able to afford it, and they can apply for those funds. So they're on our list to do it. It's a kind of a combination of anchor institution and also as a partnership, from that. And also we also understand the new superintendent, so we're trying to let the manager's office kind of
Sure, yeah.
mellow him into, all these questions.
Yeah, I guess I also thought just like even at the beginning, I know they've talked about using some of their ARPA dollars for broadband, and that's been part of the discussion. So if they were somehow putting that money in, that can get multiplied, that'd be great. And then my last thing is just on, I guess, if there's any concern on, so the BEAD grant focus being specifically, I guess, first and foremost saying rural, and we're not really, we have some rural areas of Athens-Clarke County, but obviously we're not a rural county. And then also saying like the underserved. And I guess, is there any concern about us having the priority one being connecting all these municipal benefits, which of course has a benefit to all the public general, but that it's not directly benefiting those underserved, that could hurt our grant application possibilities?
I don't know if it would necessarily hurt our grant application, but those partnerships, again, the rural areas we have, the edges of the community definitely can be seen as rural. But as we reach out there and spend a few dollars of hours and have those partners come in, broadband doesn't have to stop at the county line. So when it extends on into Oglethorpe or Madison, those are other rural areas, and those partners are bringing, we don't know exactly where some of those routes are coming from. We talked to one firm the other day that was coming from the south, and they were actually targeting kind of the Winterville area. And so it would just kind of blow right through that area. So I think it's just, I don't want to say it's the wild, wild west. It's just there's a lot of unknowns right now, and we just need a kind of a buy-in and a clear understanding that even though we call them priorities 1, 2, 3, they are truly layered. For example, if we can get the extension cord stretched that far, somebody can grab onto the end or pull off, in between. It's just right now it's hard to convince the traditional ISP to say, hey, I got one customer at this location, will you go run 5 miles? And just only charge them $45 a month. It's just, that's not there. So we got to build it. We know there's some challenges, but that's why we've got to pull the team, and the team that we pulled together we think is the best to help us answer those questions and put that application together for our best shot.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hool?
Well, speaking of partnerships, I got a partnership question and a map question, but not necessarily asking you to wear 2 hats tonight, Derek. But I am curious, a lot of our areas of highest need are rural areas in the county. Has there been any pursuit of partnership with neighboring counties to try to, get these ISPs to build further or bigger or sooner? If we're collaboratively partnering with a neighboring county to say like, hey, we'd like to invest in this program.
And Lee can correct me, and Ashley can correct me if I'm wrong, and Travis as well. We've had some conversations. I think early on we talked to Oconee County. They had a vendor that was trying to put some stuff in that didn't pan out. We met the gentleman the other day at the rural conference down at Jackson. That he was talking about coming kind of from the southeast corner. I know Jackson EMC is working with True Vista to utilize some of their infrastructure coming out of Jackson in certain areas. And so I think, it's multiple partners, it's multiple partnerships, where exactly they're coming from. I don't think, as an ISP provider, I don't truly believe they're going to look at it like power companies do. This is not our territory. This is not Georgia Power or Jackson EMC or Rail EMC or Walton. I think they're truly going to say, if I I'm just gonna use Winterville. If somebody says, I'm getting to Winterville, they're gonna shoot on out to Arnoldville. Or if they're coming the other way, they're gonna try to keep on coming and get those customers the best they can.
We good?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I'm just thinking on the front, like if we're, it's talking about putting out money for grants for matching funds. If other counties that are more rural have been awarded some of these state funds, I mean, can we be like co-applying with neighboring counties on things, I guess is what I'm wondering.
I'm not opposed to having that conversation and making sure that we get those. We'll go through the proper channels for those.
Yeah.
For,
It might, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Maybe that's a better question for Manager Williams, but.
well, I think maybe it's both. Let Lee respond and then.
So I guess, so going back to the slide where we talked about, there was phase 1, phase 2, which is the high-level route mapping, and then phase 3 is putting together the business plan. So what we've done in phase 1 is we have a good understanding of what's happening here in Athens-Clarke County. So that's kind of gives you that snapshot image. As we start to create a solution to solve that gap problem across the county, that gives us some concept of a network diagram. We want to be able to take that and then share that and expose that with other people, whether that's private telcos, anybody else within the county, but also any of the neighboring counties to go, hey guys, this is what we're working on. Is there a place that you'd want to come and partner? So that term partner is very wide and very undefined. It's not just a private telco, it's anyone else. But they have to understand what our initial objectives are and our goals, and that gives you a jump-off point to start to have that conversation. Okay, well, if you're going to build this, then I'm not going to overbuild it. Or if you're going to build this, we're not going to try to overbuild that.
Okay.
Where can we bring those things together for the most efficient model and the best use of those tax dollars?
All right, thank you. Yeah, I guess that's what I was looking for, is when we get to that stage, are we not just looking at private companies and, the school district and other things within the county? Are we talking to those neighboring counties too? And then my question about, I just have map confusion. So I'm looking at slides 9 and 10, and I'm trying to make sense of how the survey data integrates with the sort of highlighted areas of need that are unserved. Whenever I see a map, I start looking at District 6, I start looking at West Athens, and there's just on slide, this slide 9, it shows no areas unserved really, except that census tract that happens to include my neighborhood. Actually, I happen to know that my neighborhood is actually quite well served. And then when I go to slide 10, I did see a neighbor with a nice green dot there. Another one over in the adjacent neighborhood with a nice green dot. But elsewhere, with Bogart addresses and off Cleveland Road and Tallahassee Road, there's lots of red and yellow, but none of those areas were shown as areas of high need. So I'm just trying to make sense of how these maps correspond to each other.
Well, again, you've got the survey data that came in, and then we overlaid the county facilities there. And we looked at kind of the growth patterns that we think as far as the transportation network is going to take us, and just use that again. If you use the loop as the ring and some areas that we want to spar off of, these are some of the areas that hit the mapping that we do have. We can definitely add in, and as we end up going into the next phases, trying to identify these the high level mapping and scheming, we can put in some additional areas and whatnot. Again, and then going back to, I would say the left-hand side of the map is there's probably more opportunity from those neighboring areas moving in from Atlanta to Oconee. That corner is probably being more, probably the likelihood of being more served over there. And so are we back feeding something for the over-service, or are we looking at the target, trying to get to the stretches that we know that aren't currently served appropriately?
And then just following up on Commissioner Lake's comment about income, I mean, if this is all broken down by census block, right, then you could just overlay the census data without having to build it into the survey data that we collect, if you're looking to identify low-income areas.
Well, we can definitely have Ashley's team work with GIS and Travis, and that shouldn't be a problem. Okay.
Okay, we're good. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank y'all for your time.
Derek and Ashley and all the rest of the team up here. Next up, we're going to be getting a presentation from Leisure Services Director Ken Kilpatrick on the SPLOST 2020 Project 20 Park Improvement and Repairs. So he'll be setting that up, and we'll get going as soon as we can.
Sure. Let Jeff do that. That goes here. And we got it. Thank you, sir, for nothing.
You can go ahead, Ken.
Let me go ahead and get started. All right, good evening. After those two highly technical presentations, I'm here to give your brain a rest a minute. Because this is very simple, straightforward presentation, but yet it's very important, impactful to thousands of residents in our community. What we're doing is proposing the next step of our SPLOST 2020 project, park improvement funds, is to renovate Heard and Lay community centers and continue that renovation of the good work that's already begun. Real quickly, we'll go through brief project history, the statement, the concepts. I'll show you the budget, talk about next steps, and we'll take some questions. The history's in front of you too. I don't need to read all of this. I will point out a couple of items. July 7th of 2020 is when you all approved funding to allow us to renovate the old computer rooms that were getting very little use into teen technology labs. That phase, we went from a phase 1 into a phase 2 that took the whole third floor of Heard and Lake Community Centers and has been a tremendous success. A lot of great programming happening there that we'll talk about some in just a few moments. Moving down to November 7th of last year is when you all approved sub-projects 2 through 10 as part of the Park Improvements Project. And then just last week, you all gave staff authorization to move forward with the Improving Neighborhood Grant, which also includes Heard Park Community Center renovations, only because Lay Park does not fit into the census tract for that particular grant. Here's the project statement that you've seen many times before. We brought in front of you previously. And the total budget over the 11 years of tier funding for park improvements. The tier for this past year was $590,000. Of that tier has been encumbered or already spent. And it gives you a short list of some of the projects that are underway or have been completed with tier 2. So sub-project 11, which will be using the tier 3 funding, as I stated, will be renovating a lot of the remaining spaces in the community centers. And you can see there that not only is it going to tackle the other interior spaces, but we're going to look at the exterior. You've been out there, many of you are familiar with these buildings. They were built in the 70s, early mid-70s, and the renovation, the last time they got any TLC was 2001, and they show it, and it's time to give some upgrades there. This is the front of Lay Park. We'll start with Lay. This is anything but a beautiful building. Both of them are very institutionalized and do not look attractive. They do not look inviting for teens or youth or adults. What we're proposing to do is to start on the outside and really pressure wash and clean these buildings, and then look at painting them and make them a little bit more vibrant, more welcoming to people in the community. The awning that you see in front, we want to replace awnings at both of these community centers and make that entrance a little bit more modern. The top right corner is a close-up of the awning there at Lay. Not only is it dirty, but it looks like it's been hit by a few shotgun holes. That's actually hail damage over the years. So if you're under it to try to get out of the weather, you're only getting marginal coverage there because a lot of water is continuing to come through. This is the backside of Lay that truly demonstrates the need for the cleaning and painting. That's rather embarrassing as director of the department that we have facilities that look in that condition. Also, we want to try to address a lot of the overgrown landscaping that's perhaps hiding some of our camera views on the exterior of the building, but also is just not as attractive as it could be. This is Hurd Park's exterior. Again, you can't, it's hard to tell one place from the other than the landscaping. We would be taking that same approach to enhancing that entrance as well as cleaning and painting the building. And with Hurd Park, if we get some of that grant money, our hope is to take out those old ugly stairs that are crumbling that lead up to the front door and actually provide an accessible ramp to allow people to get into that building easier. Right now, you have to come through the back door if you've got access issues, and there's very, very limited parking at that back door. Again, this gives you some indication of the exterior conditions of Lay Park. Now, getting back to the third floor renovations that you all did approve, look at the difference, how vibrant that is. This is at Lay Park, some pictures at Lay, and the new furniture, the painting, the floors, the equipment, the smart boards that's in there, the TV, the equipment that you don't see here that includes 3D printers, robotics, podcasting. Some fantastic programs have taken place in here. That picture down the hallway has some new cabinets that we were able to take out of the middle room to open up for more programming space. What we have found is that not only the teens, but the young people in general in the community have really responded favorably toward this renovation. We want to bring to life the other floors of this building, just like we did the third floor of both facilities. If you look at the first floor, this is an example of some of the broken tile, old worn furniture that's been used for years, and tables and chairs, the lobbies that aren't really inviting. And what we really want to upgrade is the stairwells at both facilities. We don't want kids playing on the elevator, so we recommend a lot of use, and staff leads them up stairwells. They're dark and drab looking and need better lighting and some facelift, as well as the floor does itself at the first floor. Second floor contains some game rooms at both facilities, as well as some multi-use spaces, as well as fitness equipment. Some of that fitness equipment is very outdated. Some of it is not operational currently. At Lay Park, we see a lot of employees that go down at lunchtime and use fitness equipment, as well as the public uses it. So we want to replace some of that old outdated equipment and some of it that is no longer functional. Look at some of the worn game room equipment and get something that's more modern. We want to talk to the teens about what they would like to see in that game room space and bring something a little bit more modern, but also bring in new furniture, new paint, new flooring, much like that third floor, bring that space to life. The gym floors at both facilities are well used beyond basketball. You'll see here there's a picture of pickleball that gets played quite frequently at both facilities. Also at Hurd Park, they have a table tennis club that one morning a week, they really spread out a lot of tables, and there's a large group of people that come in. So they serve their senior programs that take place in their senior exercise and fitness, after school, summer camps, of course. They serve multi-functions as opposed to just basketball. So the floors, especially the one at Lay Park, is a new floor, but annually these floors have to be refinished in order to maintain their integrity and to keep their lifespan at their expectancy. So we come in once a year to make small repairs as needed, and to do that refinishing, and some of these funds can help do that for this next year. One of our biggest problems and complaint is the bleachers at both facilities. They are very old. It's difficult. It takes a lot of power to get them pulled out and try to extend them and retract them. What we want to do is put in automatic bleachers, because if we can get them all the way back, which these you see will not even go back all the way to the wall, it creates more floor space that when we do things like after school and summer camps, gives us the opportunity to do more programming. But we do want to put good bleachers in there. You can see how these are cracked and worn. Catches clothing a good bit, pinches people. So we want to get adequate bleachers in both facilities that retract automatically and give us more programming space when they do. Here's the budget for the project. We are starting with $450. Of course, we got the project management fees. Here's our best estimates in doing research of the cost. This is a total per site, which is a little over $212,000. If you add that up times 2 sites, we're at our project budget. Should costs escalate? We all know costs are rising. We're hoping we can supplement some of those costs either with our capital dollars, or project savings from previous SPLOST projects that are underway. If we can't supplement it, then we'll have to prioritize as we go down that list. But we feel good about these numbers because we built in some of that cushion for inflation. So our next steps is in this current cycle, we'll be bringing forward an agenda item for your approval for sub-project 11 and these renovations. We are submitting next Friday the grant for the Improving the Neighborhoods. We are submitting 3 grants, and the renovation of Herd Park is one of those 3. In January, we find out about that grant award. February, maybe March, we want to look at beginning this implementation. We have to work it around summer camps, which is some of our most critical times. So some of that improvements may slow down during that season, but then we anticipate by this time next year, we can wrap up completion at both of these facilities. With that said, I'll take questions. Yes, ma'am.
When were these facilities built? When were they built?
They were approved by Model Cities grant money in 1972.
Oh, wow.
Their construction completion was finished in 75.
Okay. And have they gotten any major facelifts since then?
The only major was in 2002. We were able to, 2001, we were through SPLOST 2020. We were able to remove some asbestos and do a little bit of an upgrade. Nothing, obviously, to the exterior. Now, the exterior has been clean on 2 other occasions, I know, since I've been here. But I've been here 36 years, so it's not saying a lot, right?
Another thing I'm curious about, has there been any consideration of the possibility of adding windows to these facilities? I know they're just, you go in there and there's just like no concept of an outside world. I'm wondering if maybe even like in the stairwells, if windows were added, it could rely on some natural light.
We've had conversations about that. We've not explored that cost. I know that would probably be extremely expensive. It certainly would not fit the current budget that we have. Mm-hmm. But down the road, I agree with you. Both from exterior and interior, more lighting would really enhance those places.
I mean, it might be an energy saving. There might be some energy savings grants out there that could apply to something like that.
Yeah, natural lighting would be tremendous, especially like in that stairwell that's so dark.
Yeah, or even skylights in the gyms,
I agree. It looks like 1970s construction, right? And not at its best. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Destin.
I think this is great. And actually had the honor of having a meeting on the 3rd floor up in a few weeks ago. A few of us were there. And yeah, that room just feels very, it's much more lively. I love like the different kinds of seating that's available. I got to use the smart board some, so it was good. It's good. It's a very positive, warm kind of atmosphere there, which I agree. Some of the other rooms do not have that.
Right.
It's definitely true. And on that, the one thing I was wondering, and especially if it could be worked in just with the current budget, is what I would hope that happen, but possibly I'd love to see a mural somewhere incorporated in that, and understand that could be a little bit more costly. If we could figure out a way to do that, that'd be great. But even if that can't be done, just some vibrant, bright colors using some of the painting that we have on the walls there on the exterior. I think that building is very drab and kind of it's not inviting. And I think that I've actually known a lot of people who've lived in Athens for a while, and I've brought up like this building, and they don't know what I'm talking about really, because it's just kind of, just disappears into the background. So I would just love to see some more vibrant colors or color schemes, and also if we could pull out a mural, I think that would be fantastic on there too.
This qualifies for that public art funds, right?
It does. So if you may recall, park improvements, there's so many small projects that consume park improvements that instead of public art for each and every one, there's that percentage is kind of set aside to where we can decide some larger public art projects down the road and strategically locate them. So that's certainly, a mural could certainly be something that would be considered.
Okay.
But maybe not happening this round, but does not mean it could not come back later.
Appreciate it.
Commissioner Hool?
It almost seems like we coordinated this, but I'm really glad you brought this up. So I 100,000% agree. I bet that pink that's real drab now was real bright when it was first built. But
Maybe.
I am, so the Rainbow Forest money, was that the entirety of the art money from this bucket, or just the entirety for that round of projects?
It was, well, it was entirety for that round.
Okay, so there is
And
another round of art money that
Yes,
will be
there is.
available, okay.
And we wrote a grant to try to get better access to Rainbow Forest, and we were unable to get that grant. So we're exploring ways that we can get that access
Okay.
to that, to improve the access.
Well, yeah, I mean, echoing Commissioner Denson, the other thing I'm curious about is, the ACAC does these little micro grants every year in the budget. Is it possible that these sites could be considered as like a site that they would look at focusing that project on? Is that, I don't know how the timing of these different entities shakes out, but just if we're going to repaint the whole building, if we can get a mural on it while we're doing it, then.
True. ACAC is currently going through some leadership change, and they're struggling to find leaders, so they've put projects like that on hold until they can find someone to step up in that leadership capacity. Staff is continuing to meet with them and talking about a plan of action going forward once they're ready to move. But the group is struggling a little bit right now. But they do want to bring back some more of those mini grants, which is something that could be considered.
Well, maybe something to think about is, there's money in the budget allocated, and if that board is still like struggling to figure out what to do this time around, maybe that money this year could get put towards this, put towards a mural for this.
Well, we certainly encourage them to stick with public property when they're doing murals, right? And, this could be a great canvas for something like that if they're interested. Other questions?
Good.
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And that gets us to the halfway point. And we will continue, I assume.
Can we have a quick break?
Let's go for, we'll take a 5-minute break here while we set up for the next one. Dang. Everyone back, and I'm going to turn this over to Diana Jackson with the SPLOST project administrator to talk about the Memorial Park improvements concept.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, Eric Commerlin and I have the pleasure of presenting to you the proposed project concepts for the SPLOST 2020 Project 16 Memorial Parks improvements. Our agenda tonight is what's shown on the screen and in your packet. Tonight's purpose, again, is to present the proposed project concept so it can move towards schematic design. The user group consisted of 3 residents and 3 staff as voting members, and their charge was to review the many previous studies that have been done for Memorial Park and develop some recommended project list and carry them into the concept planning phase. As a refresher, just want to make sure that you remember that the Bear Hollow Zoo is its own SPLOST 2020 project, okay? The next 5 slides are all history, okay? There's a lot of history with this project, and I'm not going to read them to you. You've got them all in your packet. The one I do want to point out is here. It's highlighted. On May 1st of 2018, Mayor and Commission approved the Memorial Park Master Plan. It was also sometimes known as the Vision Plan for the park. That plan had its own public engagement process that ran from June of 2017 through February of 2018. A lot of public process that went on with that one. All right, so the user group went through that master plan and some of the other past studies, and they amassed 55 recommendations. They took those 55 recommendations, they sorted them, they distilled them, they combined some of them, and they made them into 17 projects that were kind of put into 4 different categories. Those categories were forebay and pond improvements, pedestrian circulation and safety improvements, vehicular circulation and parking improvements, and playground and picnic shelter improvements. Those 17 projects went through to the public for comment. Public engagement occurred in June and July of '22. With the assistance of staff, there was both an online story map and a survey, as well as in-person community events with paper copies of the survey handed out to people. Staff and the user group reached out to our community partners, and PIO assisted with social media and other tactile messaging. Flyers were distributed to the summer campers, and postcards were sent to residents within a half a mile of the park. All of those efforts culminated in 115 respondents with more than 450 written comments. So Leisure Services compiled the voting that happened in that survey. The blue bars are their must-have. The orange are the highly wanted. Gray is nice to have, and kind of the gold ones are unnecessary. Those also in the agenda report that you have, there'll be an assemblage of each of those written comments for you to review, if you choose to look at all of them. This next slide, if you look at the left side, we scored all of those votes. The must-haves got a 0.75, highly wanted 0.5, nice to have 0.25, and unnecessary or blank were zeros. So that gave kind of an overall scoring. The projects are on the y-axis, the scores 20 to 50 something are the x-axis. So if you juxtapose that, the user group took those public scoring and the comments that they read through and did their own scoring. And that is on the left side in that 3rd column. And I just want to point out that not all of the public scores and the user group scores lined up perfectly. They were pretty close with priorities. So again, this next slide is the costs associated with each project. And what I want to point out is that those costs include a lot of the recent pricing that we saw, like on Clayton Street and stuff, for asphalt and pavement and things like that. But they were, again, estimated as standalone projects. So that's important to point that out, because if some of these projects get combined, there's going to be some efficiencies, okay? And just as an example, like if we did either the pond or the forebay, revamping of that. There's going to be some loop drive improvements that are going to be required because there's only one way in and out of that park, and that's the road. And that the hauling that would occur with taking out a lot of that sediment is going to degrade the road. And so restoration is going to be required. So again, just keep that in mind, okay? The next slide is, again, the must-haves are in the left column, highly wanted, and the right column at the top, a nice-to-have. And it's important to note that these are all 17 of the projects came forward, okay? And it's kind of, again, like a master plan for the thing. And just because it's listed as a nice-to-have doesn't mean it won't happen. It's just when we get more money kind of thing, okay? So now I guess I'd like to turn it over to Eric, and Eric's going to talk specifics of each of the must-haves. We've got both the highly wanted and the nice-to-haves here, so if you want to discuss any of them, but just kind of we want to keep the work session moving, so I don't want to go through all 17 of them tonight unless you want to, okay? So Eric, turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. And so what we tried to do with the must-haves is we took some existing maps, we started looking at GIS information, we started trying to delineate the projects a little bit more so that we could come up with those costs that we were just looking at. So I'll go through these briefly, and if you have any questions on what you think the scope of the project might involve, we'll try to answer that, but recognize we don't know the specifics yet. This is very general in nature. It's very high-level concept. So this first project, F1, the 4-bay revamp, if you've been out there, you can see that the 4-bay at the top end of those ponds is completely silted in. It's completely overgrown. So cleaning that out to begin with, and then you can see the spillway structure there on the bottom right with the old cobblestones and everything. It's a pretty structure, but it is falling apart completely. So we would reconstruct that. We would look at alternatives to reconstruct it with either concrete or maybe do something decorative or aesthetic like is currently there. So cleaning up that entire 4-bay area, reconstructing the little footbridge that crosses over the creek just as the water comes out of the spillway. Those are all elements of that project. F2, this would focus on the upper pond. And if you go out there right now, there really is no upper pond. There's a little bit of water. It is almost entirely silted in with, we're guessing, anywhere from probably 2 to 6 feet of sediment. So we made some estimates on how much sediment needed to be removed in order to restore that pond. In this project F2, we would also suggest removing the island that is currently in that upper pond. And because this work requires heavy machinery, we would more than likely have to reconstruct the sidewalk and the path and the fence and the wall, everything on that outer portion of the pond where it's adjacent to the parking lot. And as Diane mentioned, this work is very dirty, it's messy. There would also be some entrance drive reconstruction required because more than likely the construction activity would damage that asphalt drive.
I had a question on that one.
Sure.
Can you just talk about what is the difference between the F2 pond revamp and the F4 pond habitat restoration when they look somewhat similar in the descriptions, and then especially because on the public engagement, the pond habitat restoration, I think, received the highest votes of anything, so, yeah.
Yes, and so skipping ahead to F4.
It's way down.
It is way down.
I had a question about the 4-bay though first.
Sure.
Go. What sort of ecological inputs are going into your movement here? There's a lot of turtles out there.
There are. So the 4-bay, so the reason we're seeing all of the sediment in the upper pond is because the 4-bay has not been maintained over the years. The 4-bay filled up with sediment. It's no longer working. The water's running straight through. Now it's filling up the 4-bay. Eventually that sediment will continue down into the main pond and it'll just keep filling up. So When we say we need to reconstruct the forebay to collect that sediment, we then need to make sure we implement a maintenance plan to keep that sediment removed and keep that sediment from getting into the lower ponds.
So I guess my concern is, I don't want to dredge this thing every 10 years or whatever. Is there some design modification we can make to prevent the sediment or reroute it or something? I'm sure you've thought of this, but why can't we do that here?
To dredge the forebay every few years?
Or yeah, I'm thinking instead of this sort of maintenance schedule with dredging, removing sediment, are there any design changes we can make at this point to prevent that?
So the sediment is coming from everywhere
Right.
in the
Yeah.
the watershed,
Right.
in the drainage
Right.
basin. It's a combination of natural erosion that would occur whether there was any development in the drainage basin at all.
Yeah.
And there's also been some development that has probably come off of properties and has contributed to this. I don't think there is a way to stop the
So
erosion.
this is a natural process. We're creating an
Absolutely.
artificial pond in a natural, right?
Yes,
Okay.
correct, correct.
All right, thank you.
Sure. And going back to the F2 versus the F4 later, so the F4, and I'll have to go back and look at our costs on the F4. The difference between F2 and F4 was on F4, there were some ideas to reconstruct the island or a floating bio island and put some additional funds into restoring plants and habitat. So the difference between F2 and F4 is simply let's add some more money and let's go the extra mile with adding some habitat, vegetation, and maybe that floating island, a bio island. And I'd have to defer to some of my environmental consultants to give you some more specifics on that.
Yeah, okay, if we can get updated. And then, yeah, one of my concerns was about the island too. I mean, if I believe F2 is just saying we're getting rid of the island, right? We're removing.
And one of the reasons that I've heard about getting rid of the island is it's just tough to maintain it. It's hard to get people out there if it needs to be cleaned up or, I guess it's getting overgrown, and so it's hard to get personnel out there to simply clean it off. So I think that was one idea to get rid of it, was to simply, it would be easier to maintain.
But that's costly though, right? Getting rid of the island is.
That's more material to have to remove, absolutely.
I mean, because I go out there all the time. I don't have a problem with the island that's overgrown. It seems like it's nice natural habitat for the turtles and all the other animals that live in there. I've never expected staff to have to cross over into the island and clean it up. I thought that was the whole purpose, it was a natural habitat for it.
And Diana just mentioned also just adding more volume to the pond.
Sure.
Yeah, so if you remove the sediment and the island
Yeah.
from there, you're obviously creating more volume in the pond itself. And the idea would be is that we would reconstruct some of the sides to have more habitat for the turtles on the sides rather than in that one little pond or one little island in the middle kind of thing. You could reconstruct some of the sides to make it more habitat friendly for the turtles.
I guess so. But I guess if it's super costly, I don't know. Yeah.
All right, moving on. So F3, if you go out there and look now, you will certainly see some deficiencies on the lower end of the pond. The emergency spillway there on the bottom of the page, you can see the photo on the left. So there has been some just significant erosion to the point where we are going to start compromising the structural integrity of the dam itself. So under this project, we would try to make some improvements to that emergency spillway area, reconstruct it, restabilize it, put in some infrastructure that can actually handle the overflow from the pond without causing additional damage. The outfall structure, and that's the top photo on the left, that is more than likely starting to fall apart. So we would want to inspect that and replace that if necessary. And then reconstruct maybe some of the sidewalk and pedestrian structures that are necessary along that bottom portion of the pond. P3 is a small project within the middle of that main parking lot on the upper end of the park. So we would focus on just creating some pedestrian connectivity improvements between the pool area on one side and the main building on the other. Right now, pedestrians are just kind of crossing that parking area, so maybe we implement a raised crosswalk or do some additional signage. But just kind of clean up a small area of the parking lot to better highlight where pedestrians should be crossing and protect them a little better. V1, so this project is to kind of clean up the road, the entrance road, the loop road that provides the only access down to the ponds. If you go out there right now, there has been some efforts to try to reestablish the ditches out there and stabilize the ditches. We're dealing with, I think it's 15 to 18% grades in some areas, so it is very difficult to control that type of flow in an open channel. So we developed some very high-level concepts to maybe use a combination of open ditches and piping and catch basins and reconstruct that road to mitigate any future erosion, and which will allow the road to hold up better as well.
I mean, does it have to be a loop road? I mean, do we need to get all the cars right down there by the pond? I mean, we got a nice parking lot up above, a walking trail to get down there. Do we need like a I-285 to get us down to the pond?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Commissioner. Yes.
So, yeah, I was gonna.
And the elderly.
And this ties into another project, but
I mean, I'm saying you keep
Sure.
one branch to go down. Sure, you keep access for ADA, school buses, but we got two steep, topographically challenged roads
Sure.
here going down. Can we abandon one, turn it into a pedestrian walking path, maintain access with the other?
sure.
I mean, it's a park for people, not for cars. Sorry.
Yeah, I echo Commissioner Edwards there, like, because it's more flat towards the top to change that into parking and put some sidewalks, and maybe one lane down. It's just that's a steep hill, and even when I was little, used to go out here all the time. They're like just runaway cars, just people not paying attention. I don't know, but it's a very steep hill, and
It's steep, yeah.
So
Yeah.
we just put the parking at the top, put some sidewalks on the side, maybe one road down, make it ADA accessible, but if that's feasible to be.
Make sure there's a trail crossing sign.
Yeah.
I agree. The less
being
we
serious,
can
Jesse.
have for cars and more focused on people.
Sure.
Runaway
And you
cars.
can save some
Seriously.
money, It's a lot cheaper to maintain a walking path than an actual road.
I guess building on the path on the left, the entrance path, not the exit. I guess the one question, have we looked into this? Do we know that, say, if we went with the north part of the loop, is that it's not wide enough for two cars, or is it? I know the other part isn't, but
That northern side does have some parking on the side, so
Okay.
that is a little wider, and we could eliminate any parking along the side of the road, so that might facilitate two-way parking. I think the reason the road is in is because we do not have ADA access down to the pond, so right now, the only way for somebody to get down there would be to be in a vehicle, have them driven down to the bottom of the hill, and they can then get out and go around the pond, or they can access the playground. So we do have another project shown where we would provide ADA access from the upper parking lot down to all the facilities down below, which would then potentially allow for getting rid of vehicles down by the pond.
I think what's being talked about possibly is just keeping the northbound still for cars, making it two-way directional, and then the bottom part, abandoning it or making that a walking path, so you're not having to pave. Right, it would get saved on that. And also, there's no there is that trail that comes from there through the woods, and right, there's no sidewalk connecting, so everybody walks on that skinnier road anyways. I mean, I've done that and had to watch out for runaway cars coming down. So, I mean, I don't think it's a bad idea. There's no way that the traffic demand is so much that we need to have the full loop. Right?
And I don't know if Leisure Services wants to revisit the master plan.
We're making Kit nervous.
I mean, that's a fairly significant change, removing vehicles, and there is a master plan in place. So.
We would need to revisit that master plan. I'll also say that volume of cars is relative. If you go there on a weekend, it's extremely high. But not only would we have to account for all those cars being able to turn around and come back out, the school buses turn around and come back out as well. They go down there on nice and pretty days in the spring or early fall. They can often park at the top of the hill and the kids walk, but depending on the weather, oftentimes they're driving down there and unloading and reloading with children as well. So that would be part of the challenge, is how you make those turnarounds happen and create a safe traffic flow as well.
Emergency access too.
Yeah. Yeah, all the emergency access as well.
I mean, maybe it could be an allowance where you allow buses and emergency vehicles, but it's not access for all vehicles.
Yeah.
So it lowers the traffic, maybe make a wider turnaround area for the buses at the top, or allow them to back out and turn around. Just get a little more creative about who specifically might need to get down there.
Or you could
by
eliminate
vehicle.
all parking and just make it the ADA parking down there. And if you needed to come down and drop off your stuff for your picnic shelter, all the stuff to have a birthday
Yeah.
party or something at one of the
Yeah.
shelters, and then they'd have to come back up to the top and park.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's bring
kinda like
more
Yeah,
cars.
so it's
in.
limited access.
Lake Dudley Park has that.
Yeah.
Carol.
And so we just briefly discussed, if the roads are to remain, whether it's for emergency vehicles or ADA, whatever the reason, we do have erosion issues. So part of the solution, even if we keep cars out of there, we still may want to, one of the options is to improve the collection of stormwater along these steep sections of roadway so we don't continue to have the erosion, which this erosion is also contributing to silt and sediment down in the pond. So I think those are two separate issues. Do we control the storm water coming off the road? And then there's another issue. Do we keep the roads, and do we limit access to all vehicles? So V2 is a reconstruction or a refresh of the existing parking. I think repaving it and replacing some of the broken concrete and curb and gutter, establishing better pedestrian access across the road to the vehicles. So this part, V2 is simply reconstruction of the existing parking lot within the same general limits that it is currently in, but making improvements for safety and vehicle access. V3 concentrated on the portion of the loop road so that we would actually improve the parking down along the pond. Right now, the ADA access is really not there. And there's lots of erosion issues. We're not collecting the storm water efficiently. You can actually see in the photo to the left, you can see how the pine straws moved around, how that water is shedding off of the parking area, and it's disturbing the ground before it crosses over the trail and then into the pond. So again, V3 is simply reconstruction of the lower half of the loop road and the parking area at the bottom of the hill. V4 is limited to just picnic shelter number 1. That is the one kind of in the middle of the hill. We would reconstruct the parking area to provide better access to that picnic shelter, and we would control stormwater immediately surrounding that picnic shelter. They've got a little bit of an erosion issue around that shelter, and as you can see from the photo on the left, the ADA access is not very good. And PS3 is as simple as removing and replacing amenities throughout the park. So it's picnic benches, it's trash receptacles, dog waste receptacles, that type of thing. And there could be a little bit of site improvements where those things are, but it's generally the replacement of those structures. And I think that's the must-haves. Excuse me, let me go back.
All right. So then, the overall budget for Memorial Park improvements is just shy of 5.8 million, of which 4.7 is available for construction contingency. So the next steps is your consideration of the proposed project concepts at the December regular session. And if you approve that, then we will work to develop our schematic designs. It's likely, for the must-haves, okay? And it's likely that will probably exceed the 4.7, but we'll work to develop some alternatives and see what the pricing comes back at, okay? So with that, I thank you very much for your time today, and I'd like to open it up for any other questions or comments. Yes, sir.
So, excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you for your time. You briefly spoke about the F4, the floating bio island, saying that's nice to have, but it will be a, right now it's cost prohibitive, correct?
As a standalone, yes, it is, but, we could look at it with everything else and see. The user group just felt like it was more important to get the pond back in shape and then add on the bio island and the additional native plants. The user group just felt that, although the public felt like it was more important, the user group felt like with everything that had to be done, that was more important first to get that done.
No, I agree. It just, I think even just a little island for the ducks and the turtles, and it's a protected space for the animals, but it's also the floating islands do add some sort of beauty, and but if you can, with the refiguration of that parking, if there's some extra money, could that be incorporated?
We certainly can do whatever y'all desire. That's
Commissioner Houle and then Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of with where Commissioner Davenport's going here. In my mind, if we're going to put a lot of the effort in the must-have is around the pond, and if the public is saying that this is one of their, must-haves, and this is ultimately a park for the public, we want people to be there and have a nice thing to visit, not just get down to nice infrastructure with a kind of mediocre at best, habitat. And we want wildlife to use the space. In my mind, kind of more fully realizing the pond with the habitat part, prioritizing that over some of the repaving work. I hear that the stormwater management is going to be a key element of reducing the erosion issues, but if there's other things around repaving that can wait, a slightly rustic and bumpy road to come down to get to a park isn't the worst thing in the world, especially if there's a beautiful thing to get to. I'd rather have a beautiful thing to get to than a beautiful road to get to it.
Okay. Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I understand the erosion and the stormwater issues here, and they've got to be corrected, and part of correcting that is going to demand ripping up those roads or result in those roads being ripped up. I'm thinking about the future control of the erosion. Are there intentions to use things like permeable pavement or some of that green infrastructure where you have kind of this sunken vegetated areas that gather the runoff?
We can certainly consider that
Okay.
when we're looking at it. I don't believe that was part of your pricing for the concept, but certainly during schematic design, we can look to see that. We can also put it as an alternative bid type of
I'm
thing.
just thinking about the future and like having to come back and redo some of this, 15 years from now because we're not actually capturing the water, it'll just erode again. That's where I'm going with it. But then I know it is a lot more money up front, and that's why I'm wondering if there is any environmental or infrastructure grant money out there. I know that the Inflation Reduction Act is aimed at lower income communities or underserved communities, which I don't know if this qualifies, but because it is a community-wide resource, I'm wondering if it might qualify for some grant funding out there specifically to apply to infrastructure needs.
I would presume, I think
environmental needs.
like EPD's got some 319 grants.
Yeah.
For stormwater, and we could certainly.
Well, and the habitat too. Like I'm particularly interested in encouraging native habitats. We have a real crisis with the collapse of native insects that are vital to the ecosystem as the base of the food chain. And habitats like this are crucial to that, these aqua habitats. And the idea of giving non-insect animals like turtles and ducks and muskrats or whatever a place to hang out and den that is separate from people. Because if you give them an area that is on the shore, there's still an idea.
Yeah.
Birds, yeah. There's an idea that some wayward children could disrupt them and drive them off.
Okay.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, I just would reiterate, I think we have a golden opportunity here to get rid of this more southern portion of road and open it up to more people access, safe people access. We already have one spur on the northern end where we can continue to provide ADA access to the pond. But, with all these cars in this area right by the pond, it certainly affects the safety of users of this park. I know parents are certainly in a less peaceful state of mind when there's cars pulling out every which way and they have their children with them. Mobility challenged folks also cannot as safely navigate an area that's very sort of car auto-centric. So I think we have an opportunity here to really make this a safer space for all users and also address some of the erosion problems that these large parking lots have created in this county facility that's now triggering this investment that we have to make to dredge a pond out. So I certainly would. I think we got a chance to make this just a better, more peaceful, serene place where folks can enjoy this pond and not worry about cars coming and going and worry about getting run over. This is like it's like College Square. Look at how we transformed College Square. We could do the same thing here.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Do we have any other? Commissioner Tenson?
Yeah, and I guess I'm similar to this. I just the back of the napkin math here a little bit. So we're talking $4.7 million. The parking lot and repaving improvements come to over $2.3 million of that 4.7.
Right, but again, remember that those are estimated as each one of those is a standalone. So if I think that Eric and I were kind of doing a back of the napkin thing too, and thinking that it might be 60% of that if it was done as one construction project.
Okay.
Okay, so
that would be
it's still a
good.
big number, but not as big.
It's a very it's still it's very much it is a very big number. And I definitely think that when the public voted on this SPLOST project for Memorial Park improvements, I don't think that they thought they were voting for millions of dollars of repaving and parking. And I think that's actually been even shown here in the public engagement survey scoring, with all of those vehicular circulation, most of them being all in the lowest vote getters. And then, of course, that comes at the expense of not having playground improvements, which is one of the highest, or picnic shelter improvements. So I guess I would like to see an alternative come before us that either does like you're saying, keeps all the parking up at the top and has ADA compliance coming down, or some kind of other idea so that we can move more of that funding towards the public amenities, which is, I think, what people think of our parks are for. Right, the parking only exists because they're trying to get to the public amenities. The driveways only exist because they're trying to get the public amenities. I know that's a thing that we have to upkeep, but yeah, I would challenge us maybe to rethink this. Yeah.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm wondering what the savings would be by abandoning that southern leg of the loop, and if that could be applied to habitat improvement to the pond. And you know, those kind of amenities that are clearly rank higher according to the public.
Well, it looks like we've given you a lot to think about.
Yes.
Sorry.
And I, you know, because I am so car-centric here, would, you know, and any plans that come back, you know, I am curious about how we would accommodate the parking in the already busy parking lot at the top. But I look forward to, and I'm sure we all look forward to updates on this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Deanna. Anna.
Well, I guess just while we're here, Diane and Eric, to that point. So unless we experience a net loss of parking spaces, to Mayor Pro Tem's point, we would have to move the parking lot from below to the top of the hill if we wanted to keep the same number of spaces.
Yeah, so down below, there's about
We're
8?
extremely lacking in parking at that location. There's requests for events and large groups to come in that we have to deny because we don't have the parking for them. Master plan calls for more parking at top of the hill. As a matter of fact, right up adjacent to the existing parking lot across from the building would be a parking deck that kind of built into that hillside to address that. But of course, that's got to be potentially future SPLOST funding to address something like that.
Well, the reason I bring it up is I think that this idea, good one, was given under the auspices of saving money. But unless we want to go with less parking, then creating a new parking platform at the top of the hill, which is challenged, just knowing the topography, as opposed to just, revitalizing what's already there, is probably going to be a more intrusive grading, cost. So I understand about the safety concerns, and that in and of itself is probably enough. But if I just want to make sure that, and I'm asking the engineers while we're here, if we move parking from at the bottom of the hill to the top, that may not represent a great savings of funds. And that's a question, not a statement.
I don't think it will represent any savings. And if we do, we still have to control stormwater, simply removing.
Would you go to the microphone?
Sorry. Simply removing the pavement, we still need to revegetate and restabilize those very steep slopes. Simply throwing grass on it's not going to do it. There'll have to be some other mechanisms to make sure that we get vegetation on there to stabilize it. So, and now you have the additional cost of real demolition of those structures. So it certainly can be done, but if you're doing it just to save money, I don't think that's the answer.
Right. So there were several alternatives tonight. One is redo what's there. One is don't spend money on redoing what's there and defer that into the future. And a third is eliminating it altogether. And the only one that you would save funds on would be the middle one, where you deferred and spent the money on something else.
Or what about if we did like we're talking about, where we move traffic only onto the northern bound road didn't have to spend as much money completely repaving and stuff, the southern bound, in which we just made that into a walking, which it already is a walking path, in which then that would save money from the walking path project and stuff. I mean, I don't know.
So are you suggesting instead of a loop, maybe getting rid of one leg and then having a...
Yeah, I think that's what, yeah,
two lane,
Russell was bringing
Okay.
up. Just that, and that they were saying the one leg has parking on it, parallel parking on it, so that could be used to go both directions. And so where it says V5, which I know that's not what it actually is, but
Right.
getting rid of that whole part and just having that be the pedestrian path, which it already uses that.
Right, so you're talking about taking this, I'm trying to do it with a mouse
Yeah.
here. And you would use that, and we'd have to have some sort of turnaround
Right.
down in this area for cars to turn around, right? And then turning this into the walking path,
Perfect.
right? That's what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
And maybe just having to not allow school buses to go down there anymore.
And you could have it be down here, you could have then ADA parking down here, and then maybe a load zone where people could load and unload. Because that's what I think
Yeah.
I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But you're going to reduce the parking capacity in the park as a whole. When you do that, and it's a park it's got the
Right.
least amount of parking, the parking demand is the greatest.
So you
of
have,
any park we have.
so you have like 4 spots here, I think, if I recollect, and maybe like 10 or so along here. And then maybe 1 or 2 that are parallel parking here. It's been a long time since
Yeah,
I've
it's a
been
little
there.
more than that,
but-
it's close.
Commissioner Hool has a question.
Yeah, I guess it's just more, what I'm pulling away from this discussion, and thank you very much for, I mean, this has been a lot to put together, so I know that this is kind of throwing a wrench in your spokes here, but, you know, the public seem to really be favoring, like, what can we do to the amenities and less valuing roadway improvements. The user group seemed to modify that a bit based on what they thought made the most sense, and I think what I'm hearing from the room here is, you know, it wasn't lost on me that you said just handling the must-to-haves probably runs through the whole budget. So all the rest of the 17 projects we don't even get to touch. They're all fully deferred for however long. So it's not like there's like extra money to go around. I'm hearing pretty clearly that even deferring a section of this or taking a different approach to a section of this probably doesn't save us much money because you still got to handle the erosion issues. But I think what I'm hearing from this side of the room is focusing our priority on the amenities that the roads get to and deferring on any road improvements and parking improvements is kind of the priority we're shifting back to, which looks more like what that public input priority was. And letting the roads, whether they're improved upon a bit or abandoned or what, but like, in my mind, letting them be in worse shape, much worse shape than our average public roadway would be, is maybe not the worst thing in the world, in favor of having better things to get to. And I can't, this is not necessarily what I'm getting from the entire room, but I think from part of the room is like, maybe a reduction in parking isn't so bad. I hear you that the high demand is there, but I mean, like if we can't have larger events there, but maybe this park just doesn't accommodate larger events because we don't have the money to put that in place. I mean, I don't know.
Well, might I add too, that the amenities that you're talking about, that we need, and we do need, the playground, rehab, those picnic shelters, our park improvement monies, and we got 9 more years of that coming, can do things like that. And we've already identified that whatever this project does not do for us, it can do that in small pieces. What park improvements can't do is come in one fell swoop and address your stormwater and parking and road issues. It's not funded enough for that. But we can rebuild a picnic shelter, we can put in a new playground, and we want to do those kind of things. We're just seeing how far this money goes.
Okay, that's helpful to understand.
And I would tell you, one of my biggest concerns is, and I have not dredged this pond, but I've dredged the beach and water treatment plant pond, and we took out hundreds of tons of sediment, hundreds. And if you get a dump truck coming down there, that won't take long before that's a third world road. Okay, so.
One last, we have two more presentations, so one more last comment, question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if this parking around picnic shelter number 2 could be maybe largened enough to accommodate the loss of the parking at the very bottom there and then abandon that lower leg. It's more about the pedestrian friendliness of the whole the whole park itself, offering more opportunities to get to and through the park that are completely devoid of contact with cars. And I feel like that might encourage more people to walk and bike to the park and reduce the number of vehicles.
I mean, yeah, and that's the point I was making, was to explore removing the southern leg of that road, to where you just have the northern branch come down.
And if you have to expand a parking lot somewhere else, you know, fine, but just creating that safe space for people.
It is kind of crazy that we don't have a safe way for pedestrians to get down there.
Without using that road.
Without,
Yeah.
well, it's not a safe way, right? You're having to walk in the road with cars coming behind you. It is kind of wild that that's not in here. Yeah.
It's not safe.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank you very
everybody's
much.
comments.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Good, and this is a perfect, movement, discussion as we move to SPLOST 2011, Project 22, the Youth and Community Enrichment Facility candidate sites, and the presentation we're getting from Keith Sanders from the SPLOST office.
All right.
Go for it. It's yours.
Good evening, thank you. We'll try to go through the slides. There's a lot of them, but we'll try to go through real quickly. We are here to talk about the 2011 SPLOST program, Project 22, the youth facility. This one was tiered at the end of that program, and with COVID, it is a little later than we would like to get finished, but we're moving forward with it, making good progress right now. So we're going to, what our purpose, go through the site selection committees, recommended candidate sites, answer your questions, and in preparation for y'all considering these four sites, and your December vote meeting. And then you can see the rest of the agenda there. So there's, as with Diana's, for your review and during the prep and for the public's review, we did put a lot of history here. I'm not going to go through each of these. We'll hit this on a recap slide with the schedule, so we'll pick up all of these items, but mostly wanted to make sure the public was well aware of what has been going on for this project. So this is our user group. We've got staff members. We've got members of the Land Trust. Heather Benham's here with us tonight. Ella Willingham is a resident, lifelong resident of Athens. Xavier Coates is an alumni of one of the programs that's currently ongoing that would be housed in the facility. And then we have school district representative and also Paisley Stewart from HCD. And Andrew Saunders is, of course, y'all know, serving interim director of HCD, but he was also on here in his role as director of facilities or central services. So that history, I'll catch you up here on this schedule. The user group for this facility began meeting back in, they've been going on for a while, but in 21 we started focusing on site selection criteria. And in May, when the site selection committee kicked off, then we were ready to take that criteria to them and take it out to the public. That's been advertised. We've gotten public feedback. You have approved that criteria. Then we took that criteria and used it to rank into potential sites, and we got the top 10 of those sites out of our area, took that back to the public, and we'll look at those comments in a second. And that's been out for quite a while. Took that public comment and the pros and cons of all those potential sites. User group presented to the site selection committee their recommendations, and tonight we're presenting to you the site selection committee's recommendation on those. So one of the things that you've already looked at, but again, just sort of recap, is the facility program for the spaces and the square footages and what the programs that the Land Trust plans to operate out of this facility are shown there on the left. This again is something that you've already looked at and approved in your last agenda on this project. So when we went out we did our site selection criteria, we had a project boundary, which is generally centered around the West Broad neighborhood. West Broad area, that's the dark blue. That was our most wanted or nice to have. Got the highest score of projects when they were in that boundary. The little blue perimeter outline was the next range of categories. That was our highly wanted. And then the light blue, in order to fit the needs of the project, it must have fit in that light blue area was our nice to have or must have. Again, this is criteria that you approved. This is what we used to score all of the sites against with the different point values. I won't go through them in detail since you've already looked at that once, but just wanted to recap. That's what we used to develop the points that we're talking about in these next slides. So since you approved the criteria, we ranked all of those parcels got looked at, whether some of them fell off because they didn't have must-have of enough acreage, or they couldn't be combined, or they were residential properties. But we actually looked at all of those with the help of GIO. They did an excellent job pulling this information together for us and working with the team for that. And so these were the top 10 that went out for public input. And from that, we had 44 people respond and 160 written comments. And you've got the full listing of comments in your agenda package to be forthcoming, or you can use the link here and you can see all of them. We advertised pretty extensively on the website, social media, radio promotions. We did have a presentation and discussion with the Black Pastors meeting, with the West Broad Rising quarterly meeting. We met with them. We've had tabling events at Farmers Market, handing out flyers, and then also in-person public meeting at Rock Springs Park Community Center. And all of that went on from September 14th to the 9th, as noted there. So with that information was used by the user group, then to the committee, and that gets us to the sites they want to recommend to this body to move forward with our next round of evaluation, or a much higher level evaluation. These are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. They're not in any kind of order. They're not a priority order. It just is a numerical order that they fell. In the first rankings, I think they are listed in their score values, but when we go to this next phase, we really start over. We've got our sites that we're going to look at. We'll go through and see how the proposed concepts can fit on the sites. We'll look at topography, stormwater, how all those things that are needed could work on each of these sites, and we'll develop some drawings and matrix like this to bring back to you in executive session down the road. So first site is the existing Old West Broad School site that's been talked about for quite a while. It is in the earlier rounds, it was the highest scoring that made it to this section. It was probably the most positively commented on in the public comments. If you look through those, you'll see probably the most, but I think that's largely due because it's the site that most people know. It's visible. People have seen it for years, and they know it, and I think that probably focused some of those positive comments towards that. So overall, again, I won't read all these to you. You've had time to look at it. It is a pretty good site. It does have historic buildings on it that need renovation. That comes with both positives and negatives. Yes, you get a good historic building that you can renovate and really make a nice facility out of and save a historic building, but that comes with cost and challenges as anything else. It's got the right amount of acreage. The garden needs for the facility have already been shown to work real well on the site. This would be a combination of a couple of parcels. There's the large piece and then the smaller outline in the aqua. Both are owned by the school district. That smaller one, aqua, would probably still be used for parking. That's what it is today. It's in the floodplain. Don't think we would really want to do much in that except maybe maintain it for overflow parking as needed for like Farmers Market Day or things like that. The second site is across Parish Street from the school district. It's sometimes known as Gresham Shroud property. I think that's largely, most of it is owned in different parcels by one or two people. But it would be this odd-shaped outline. Again, in the aqua, there is a existing residence that we wouldn't be looking to acquire as part of that. But it is primarily in the block of Paris, Campbell, Miller, but then there's also part on the other side of Miller that would also could be looked at as part of this particular site. It's got it does have some benefits. It does have some It's in both of these sites that we've talked about are in the nice-to-have target zone for the facility, which gave them a few extra points. It is currently zoned commercial general, which is really good for what the intended use is. It wouldn't require rezone, although we would probably rezone it to government if this would be the chosen site. It naturally fits within what the program is looking to do. It is already developed. It's got some, it does have some environmental issues, cleanup issues that need to be done. It's got a lot of abandoned cars on it. You can kind of see that in the background. Yes, sir.
I just got a question. Miller Street, the blue square, there's a square inside that square, and I'm just wondering why.
It's the way the parcel's laid out on the tax rolls.
Okay.
We haven't gotten in and done a deep dive on evaluation if it's just an easement or what it is, but that's the way it shows on the tax map. So it's not the exact shape. It is partially included the shape of a building within that space. My guess is maybe within that, a family member or somebody along the way wanted to parse out part of it either for a loan or to satisfy some estate issues. That happens. Because generally the only other time you see something like that in the middle of a parcel, in my experience, has been if it's a cemetery or something in the middle of a piece.
Yes.
But that's not what this is. It's got a building on
It's a
it
building.
for part of it. So it probably was done as some sort of estate issue over time. I don't know. That's one of the things that we would look at as we go through the next steps.
Keith, on the potential environmental site cleanup, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of concern I have with that, with especially this being at least part of it being like agricultural use, that there would be, I don't know.
We would have to look at it and see what I say when I say environmental. There's just a lot of abandoned cars, whether there's been leakage out of those onto how deep that goes, or if there's fuel tanks. But it would require more than likely some cleanup of that, and that would have to look into that as we do the next level, which would be your phase one's environmental, and then if that requires something going further. But I think we'd have to clean it up as part of work that we do, and it would also, that might dictate where the garden might go,
right,
versus a building.
Okay.
I'm not trying to insinuate that I know or think that it's some brownfield site or something.
Right.
We just know, you can drive by and look at it. You can see it on the aerial maps, the number of vehicles that are on there. The third site is what we call a greenfield site for the most part. It's currently undeveloped site. It's at the end of Honeysuckle Lane. Honeysuckle Lane is the road if you turns down next to what's McAllister's now, used to be Steak and Shake. If you see up here in the red, there is across the top, there is an apartment, a long linear apartment building. It's 2-story. I don't know how much renovation. It's been cleaned up and renovated in recent years, painted, and just the site's been cleaned up. I don't know anything about the building itself, but that is there. And then the property we're looking at is the 3 acres at the end of that lane. There is a residential building on it. I don't know if anyone's currently living in there or not. There's also a sewer easement that we would have to contend with on the property. But that wouldn't prevent us from using that for drive or parking. You could even have the garden on top of the easement. It's just that anything we potentially built on top of the easement, if public utilities had to come through and do a replacement, we had to dig it up, it would be the land trust responsibility to replace it. So we wouldn't build any structures or anything that would be expensive to rebuild, but we could do gardens. We have the cooperative extension facility on the west side of town has their garden, their demonstration garden goes across the top of the sewer easement out there. So there are things that can be done, but that does impact the site for building and grading. This is close proximity. Again, it's in the nice to have area. It's close proximity to a couple of different bus lines. It's sort of in the middle of or in between the ones on West Broad and the ones on Baxter. It does have adequate space for at least from what we know from this point, space for the buildings and gardens. It is zoned residential. There are residents that back up to, as you can see on the vertical line there, the north-south. There are residents that would back up to the facility, but if you look at the public comments that were given, there are several from those residents who supported this piece of property for this facility. So I don't recall there being any negatives from those residents, but not all of the comments were easily identifiable about where they came from. But there were people who identified as living in these homes who supported this location. This site doesn't have access to Magnolia, but there is the potential that we could maybe work with a property owner in that triangle piece to the left and perhaps gain some easement across that to get to Magnolia. There is a church to the south that provides some opportunity perhaps for some shared use of parking or entrances or just coordinating with them and maybe having some cooperative efforts going on there. And then it does also, there's a historic building on Magnolia that's at the southern corner off of this property, but it is adjacent to it. So those are the three primary sites that the user group presented and that the site selection committee looked at and recommended. There is a fourth site, which is the existing health department building that was part of the official recommendation from the site selection committee. We have learned since that one of the reason this was out there was some discussion that maybe the health department was not going to fully utilize this facility, or there was space available for some shared use. They have communicated with us this past week, and I'm sorry, Chair, this is the first time you're hearing this, but they did communicate back with us this week that they fully intend to use this entire facility. So the building itself piece is really, I would say, based on their lease and their acknowledge they're going to fully utilize it, would say probably is off the table. The property across the street is all Athens-Clarke County owned, but it by itself is not big enough to do. It might house a garden, but it wouldn't be big enough to do the whole facility by itself. But it is one of the four that came out of the user group and the site selection committee. So those are the four sites. As we move down to next steps in that same schedule I showed you earlier, the next thing would be for Mayor and Commission to take action on these sites. And if you approve, then we would move into studies for those and then bring that back to staff and the site selection committee. And then ultimately they would bring back to you a recommendation. We're thinking in March for one of the three sites. And that's it for questions.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, this is in my district, and it's kind of been one of my pet causes for probably at least a decade now. Because I feel like this whole concept of this community center was pretty much inspired by the activities that started happening at the old West Broad School. And it's clear that the public, understands that that's clearly the best site for the vision for this project. I just hope that the school board will be open to finally allowing that property to be used for the greater community benefit. It's a shame that, the land trust was kind of kicked off the property just as the pandemic started and that property was abandoned and dilapidated. It could have been, a safe place for the community to gather outdoors and grow food and engage in community activities at a time when people were stuck inside and separated and had a hard time accessing fresh food, quite frankly. Historically, it's always had these kind of activities. It was a school. It was a school that had a garden. That garden was once a ball field. It has a long history of being a place where the community gathered. So I really agree with the public that by far that's the best site, and there are so many shortcomings to the other sites, primarily that most of them are not really safely accessible to pedestrians. They have no direct crosswalk, and I know right now the West Broad site doesn't, but there's a clear plan for that roundabout that would have very safe pedestrian access. you know, and I know that there's been at least 2 fatalities on that downward stretch of West Broad Street, right by that Paris Street area, just in recent years, maybe 3, actually. So, I mean, I am like 100% all in on that West Broad site, and I do hope that the school district comes to its senses and realizes the tremendous community benefit that utilizing that property for these purposes would have, and it would have a tremendous benefit on our school children, a place for them to go and engage in activities after school and agricultural activities, and the general community to come together, intergenerational activities. The impact that the West Broad Market had on that community and in bringing communities together during those handful of years that it was there was tremendous. The friends that I made in those social situations every Saturday had a tremendous impact on me personally, and I saw it on many other people. And the communities that typically did not interact, who did, and the relationships that were built in that environment was something that really brought this community together. And I feel like since that's been gone, there's been a real loss to the entire community.
Thank you. Commissioner Houle and then Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, just a history question for, it might be Manager Williams or maybe Mr. Sanders. You know, this project's obviously, you know, more than a decade underway, had a lot of momentum behind it before I came on. But the initial project description just says Athens-Clarke County. And then, you know, the community requirements say, you know, must be located within the search boundary defined on the map. Could you just provide a little context for the rationale of how initially this project went from just a project stated to say Athens-Clarke County to that specific map designation and not including the whole rest of the county?
Go
ahead.
So when the project was initially submitted as part of the 2011 program, you're right, it does say Athens-Clarke County, and it was originally submitted by the Boys and Girls Club, and when they submitted it, they had a target piece of property that they were looking for in another part of the area, and more in the, I think, out, what was the school? It's Vincent Drive area. But when it came time to this project to get launched, when it came up in the tiering, the Boys and Girls Club at that point, that site wasn't something they wanted to pursue any longer. And they just didn't have the capacity to do this kind of project. And even if they had, the process that we would go through, or the government goes through, would be to put an RFP out for a vendor, because there were no operational dollars for the facility once part of the program. So once that mayor and commission developed the RFP, there was an ad hoc committee appointed by the mayor that was, that committee selected the land trust as their partner for it, and as part of that proposal that they presented and selected, it was to do the programs that they currently have that are served in that neighborhood, in that West Broad area, and that was the vision they brought as part of their proposal. So that was what generated that not being countywide, because their proposal was based on serving that particular area.
Okay, so am I correctly reflecting what you're saying to say that while the initial description didn't have a specified location, there was kind of an intent of that area, and then that was more formally captured by the ad hoc committee that the mayor appointed later on, and that's where we got that project map from?
Well, when the ad hoc committee and the mayor put that committee in the RFP that went out, it was open for countywide. So anybody could have submitted a proposal and gone through that evaluation and been part of the project. But the land trust is the party that won that proposal going through that RFP process. They were the ones
so
that Mayor
basically
Commission
since they
awarded
won
it to.
that. Okay, yeah.
And that was part of the proposal they submitted, was to do this in this area.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful.
And their work went back a decade before that in that area, so.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Commissioner Edwards.
Could you go back to site number 1, please?
Yes, sir, I think so. Yes, sir. That's the school district site, the West Broad School.
Yeah, so, you know, to me, this is just kind of one of those projects, you know, the years just tick by, right? They just keep ticking by. It's like we're in a Dickens novel, right? I mean, when I first came to this community, I mean, this was like a slam dunk. This is a great project. This is a great farmer's market. And to me, it's just so sad that what I estimate to be just a handful of voices that are antagonistic against this use right here. Maybe they had a bad memory on this parcel. I don't know what it is. Because you really don't hear much from them except just no, no. And you know, I'm just tired of hearing it. It should be there. I've heard from so many residents all over this county. They want it there. You line up these 3 sites, it's got to be this way. I mean, how are we going to clear out Mr. Grisham's, all his cars? I mean, and then we're going to have to close Miller Street? I mean, no. I'm saying no. It's got to be that one. And, you know, I salute your patience in trying to just get this thing forward. I mean, you know, aren't we tired of waiting? Aren't we tired of waiting? You know, 17 years to go through Oconee Hill Cemetery. I don't want to wait 17 years on a 2010 SPLOST. This is where this should go.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Do we have any other comments? I have a question. Have we talked, I mean, it's not just the school board, but the school, have we had preliminary discussions with anyone in the school district about this site?
Well, let me start with that, and then Keith, if you would, because I did have an inquiry from a sitting school board member about why the school board had not been notified. And you don't have to Google search very far. This is very controversial, and this is the school district's property. As far as the timing of notification and any type of negotiation on behalf of staff, that's simply not part. This process that we're going through is a mayor and commission approved process that we've followed for multiple projects. And so we've done this over and over again. And at this point, when we're just considering candidate sites, and I know it doesn't seem intuitive, but staff does not approach the property owners because only, you know, of the 10, well, in this case, of the 4 sites, only one's going to be the one we're really going to go after. So, Keith, I thought the school board member had a very good question. Why have we not contacted the school about this, or what is our process? How does it dictate the timing of notification and conversations?
Sure. So we do have a school board or school district employee that's part of the user group. So it's not like it wasn't known to the school district. And I don't know, and I'm not trying to get her in trouble or anything, but she has been it has been out there. So in the process, though, because the question came up about some other properties, why we haven't addressed them or gone out and talked with them. The process as it's laid out, we don't communicate with or contact property owners at this early stage for one main reason is that to do so would be saying you're giving them the right to say no to their piece of property. And if you do reach out to somebody and they say, no, I'm just totally not interested, but it becomes the best site, then if we've taken that public comment or taken that to them and asked their opinion, it somewhat preempts mayor and commission ahead of the game. I mean, while eminent domain is something that used very sparingly and that is something that's not, you know, I know this body has expressed not desired, it still is an option. And so for a property owner early in the game to say, take mine off the list, don't consider it, preempts your ability to do something with that site should you want it. And the other part of that is, so if you're not going to take it off, if a property owner tells you they want you to take it off, well, then you've really pissed them off. Sorry. If you've given them the opportunity to comment and you're going to ignore it. And so it's better to not contact them. It's at least, I think the logic behind the reason is it's better not to contact them early until you know whether or not it's one of the sites you want to go forward with.
Do we have any other comments?
I guess, yeah, I wouldn't, I guess the attorney's not here, but I'm a little curious, you know, what are the eminent domain lines that are drawn between 2 government entities where you have the school board and the?
I can answer that. You cannot condemn. So the school board is considered another government, and governments cannot condemn property or exercise eminent domain over each other.
What if the buildings became in such a state of disrepair that they become, I don't know, a nuisance maybe?
My understanding is the state, and I believe, so the state does not have to adhere to our building codes. I think it may be the same for the school district.
Yeah, I don't think the school district's required to submit through the building permit process.
I mean, to me, it's an interesting question. I mean, if the buildings are just vacant and their vines are growing over them, they get knocked down, there's infestation, I mean, at what point does someone have to act to do something?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I can try to find out.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, I just encourage my colleagues to recognize that there's plenty of things that have taken a long time that haven't been anyone else's fault, that have often been just completely within the purview of this government. Things take a long time. SPLOST projects take a long time. The school district owns the property that I think we're all most excited about, but they have other very important things to consider. They have their own reasons for things to take time. So I don't in any way fault the school district for making the decisions they've made about this property. I think they're trying to do the best they can with their own struggles of managing a lot of different priorities and a lot of different opinions and a very limited amount of resources. I'm excited that this is an opportunity for us to partner with them and hopefully move forward in a way that offers this site a bright future instead of, a lack of use right now. But I would just really encourage my colleagues to, speak respectfully and not start leaping to what dramatic steps we might need to take to try to force some kind of outcome. I think that, the school district also would like to see a good use of this property, and I hope that we can move forward in a partnership on that soon.
Yeah, I apologize if I gave the impression that eminent domain was something you would use with a school district site. It was just in general with other property owners. That was not my intent.
I wasn't speaking so much to you, Keith, but thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just want to testify that as the representative for this area, I've gotten at least 3 calls in the past maybe 3 months or so from nearby residents or a member of the Hill Chapel Church concerned about the safety of this area because of the dilapidated and vacant buildings and the shady characters that are drawn to it, the darkness. There's a street light out right now, apparently, and with all the vacant buildings, it just adds to the darkness. There's some street racing going on through the neighborhood. So it's really drawing the whole neighborhood down and as a vacant property. And that could be avoided if it were to become a community center that had, almost 24/7 activity going on.
Right.
Okay, I think that we have had all the comment and discussion from our commission body here, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank your staff for all their work. And that moves us on to our final presentation on project SPLOST 2020 Project 3, the Classic City Center Arena. And we have the Classic Center Director, Paul Kramer, here to deliver that presentation. So.
Okay. Thank you for having me back again tonight. I am here to again discuss with you the Hickory Street parking deck. And as you'll remember, you have approved the project concept in the last agenda report. So tonight we're really here to be able to present the schematic design or talk about the schematic design. We will be coming forward to ask for the opportunity to move forward with that schematic design and go out for bid. and then ask for approval for Jacobs and Impact to do their project management as we move forward, and then approve an IGA between ACC Government and the Classic Center on 2 parcels of property, and then authorize the mayor and appropriate staff to execute the related documents to be able to move this forward, as we've talked about it for quite some time. As you're aware, the arena is going to attract quite a bit of development in and around this area, which will drive a good bit of private development, which will create taxation for the tax allocation district in and around this area as well. Also, there'll be quite a bit of visitor spending, which will be created with the Classic Center currently generating $50 million a year in economic impact, and now with the arena coming in, adding these things which we have talked about for quite some time as well. But the Hickory Street deck is really that final connection piece. It does a lot more than just park cars. The Hickory Street deck will really connect our downtown to the river. It will be designed to allow that same elevation as the Foundry Street elevation to continue all the way across Hickory Street, and this deck will be designed so that it can exit out very swiftly for large events, exiting both Hickory and Willow. And it will provide for what's known as a podium slab, so that you'll be able to build on top of this deck as well, as you'll see. And then it does provide for truly a 3-way partnership, one with the hotel to the north, secondly for our arena, and then third, whatever might get developed to the south of the parking deck as well. Truly being a community asset and really set up for connection to the river and beyond, and the bike lanes and whatnot, and all the outside recreational opportunities that are there. One of the most important things is, as we've designed the arena, I'll just remind you that we really do need to have an exit pathway to the east. And so this connection to the parking deck allows its stairwell and elevator towers to bring you down to the sidewalks and then connect down to the river from there. So this would be the top level that would provide that connectivity. You see the bridge coming over. You see how close it is to the proximity of the hotel, and they intend to have rooftop amenities there. And then the shaded area would allow you to put additional 21,000 square feet of something on top of this parking deck, which I think is really a credit to the forethought of the user group and to our board that said, if you're going to do this, we need to make sure that that top level can be used for something else as we move forward. Coming down, you see that it's a very standard deck, 130 spaces on 4, same on 3, same on 2, and then you've got level 1. This is where deck geeks such as myself and some of my staff are very excited, because you have a tremendous number of lanes that will allow us to exit the deck very quickly. If you've ever come to a concert, parked in a deck, and have been stuck in there for sometimes 30 minutes while you're trying to exit, that is what we have tried to avoid. And again, if you were to exit all 500 just out onto Hickory Street, you would have issues regardless how many lanes you had, because you're dumping everyone out on one street. But in this case, we have gone to the extent of also having that additional roadway that connects all the way down to Willow Street. So I think it has been fairly well thought out. The far northern parcel, or the parcel on the left, is the one that you've already transferred to us that we'll be developing a hotel upon. And then the shaded area in pink is the additional 2-acre tract of land. We've long talked about the parking deck going here, but we have not formally transferred that parcel of land. But we, with this next proposal, will be asking you to do that in the IGA so we can build out the deck. We have reached out to the user group and to my board and asked them both. There were a couple of different renditions of what the exterior would look like, but unanimously and overwhelmingly, this was the skin of the deck that they had all recommended. It gives you a really good idea of what this will look like along the roadway. And I'll remind you that the arena has kind of metal paneling on the exterior of it. So this would seemingly blend in with that quite well.
What road is that?
That was Hickory Street. And you know, the paved area on the other side is likely the multimodal leading up to the arena. And the financial plan, I know we have been through this before. It is 500 space deck. The estimated cost per space is higher than what you would typically see. However, I'll remind you that we're building this literally over a regional water retention area that our project has greatly expanded, and so that has a lot to do with the inflated cost here. But then the current funding sources that we have, one would be from the developer on the property swap opportunity to the north. And then we had in the last bond $2 million that could be used for this effort. And then we would be looking for the developer of the hotel to be contributing to this as well. And then we would have the food and beverage and entertainment area across from the pedestrian walkway from the arena that would be a land lease that we could put towards this as well. And then we would have a remaining $9,455,000 left to finance. And you see how we would do that in the lower box with the annual allocation coming in from the land leases, tax allocation district, special district, air rights, hotel fee for us to manage that for them as we do envision managing the deck, and then additional parking revenue that could come in. And the nice part of this is that these revenue streams not only take care of the debt service for the deck, but it would also provide the ability for the authority to be able to raise its wages up for a starting wage of $15.85 an hour, which we know has been a long-term want from this commission and from the authority, and leaves us a little bit of excess, which becomes very important, I'll remind you, because in this scenario, we're not asking the mayor and commission to back these bonds. So this would either come about from financing with local banks, or we are pursuing a TIFIA loan because of the connectivity of this parking deck and how it links pedestrians and bike traffic and improves vehicular traffic. We think there might be a good opportunity that we'd be able to get a TIFIA loan. It is not a grant. It is a loan that still needs to be paid back, but with very good interest rate as well. The reason all of this is moving quickly is, as you have been down there, I'm sure, and seen, the retaining walls are going up and the foundations are in, and this project is moving very swiftly and is expected to be completed sometime February, March of 24. And so we've got to have that connection on the other side of Hickory Street, again, for the egress purposes. And so you have an agenda item which has been submitted, And you will see that we'll be coming before you with that, requesting the property that we've outlined, the air rights above the rail line. You might recall, this was a while ago, we purchased at one point the all of the air rights to be developed above the rail line, and that was purchased early on, but it was done in the name of Athens-Clarke County, and so we will be asking for those rights to come back to us so that we can lease them out to the developers so we can generate more tax revenue for this area. Mayor and Commission will not be asked to back this bond. We will be bringing forward an IGA and asking for the ability for the Classic Center just to borrow funds, but without the backing. And then the Classic Center needs to still get the financing for the repayment of all this. And then under the timeline on the right-hand side, you'll see that in December we are asking for approval of the schematic design and the IGA. January, the Classic Center would prepare its financing, and then in February we'd come back and ask for approval of a special district, and then the approval of the financing itself, and then the approval of the stair and bridge construction and the award of the parking deck overall in March. So then the next steps are really for you to approve the schematic design, approve the staff to advance the bidding, and then approve the increase, as I mentioned earlier on, for the project management team, approve the intergovernmental agreement between us, which would include, obviously, the land that we have talked about and the air rights above the track. With that, questions?
Commissioner Hull, can you go back to the next step slide? I think it was different than the one I have here.
You want me to go back where?
Oh, just the slide here, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it'd be helpful. Could we get the latest version of the slideshow sent to us after this? Thanks. I guess just my one question, or it's more a request, I guess, probably of staff. When we get this IGA brought forward to us, that advisory group that the mayor appointed, which has some labor representatives on it, I'm especially interested in hearing what their feedback is on the IGA, so we can consider that when we're.
You're talking about tax allocation district group.
No, the parking
earlier
deck.
committee that was to look at, not the deck, but a certain.
Hotel.
Maybe the hotel, and you invited.
The
one-
property
It was
committee.
the parking deck and hotel, and there was a.
I refer to them as the property committee, is that right?
It's the one with labor representation,
Yes.
but that was not for them.
No, that was just on the hotel
You might
site.
explain that to everybody.
Sure. So there are actually two different committees. One was directly connected to the first IGA when you were transferring property, and the second was just on that one specific site that the hotel went on. That one, Commissioner Hool, is the one that we had the labor representatives on. And if that's the group that you would like to come back and talk about that parcel, that'd be fine. But what I'm referring to is the property committee, which had a much broader span of the property on it, but that was a slightly separate group. But I'd be happy to have either one of those comment. Both of them are really, they've gone through this with both the developer and the hotel group and have given consent to be able to move forward.
I'd be very interested in just hearing the feedback of that committee's take, because especially those two representatives, it's been rare for us to get that perspective baked into these processes. So I'm especially just curious to hear what they have to say. Thank
Sure.
you.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate Commissioner Hull's concerns about making sure those committees get a stab at basically all of these items that we'll be considering next month, but particularly the IGA as it pertains to labor concerns. And also, my persnickety design.
Do you want me to go back to that?
Well, I noticed that, what is it? One of the first slides, you talk about using the bottom level for bike shop climbing wall. But when I see the schematics, I don't see any kind of commercial use on that bottom floor. And I feel like it is essential. I mean, it's one thing to have some kind of.
No. I didn't cut you out. I promise. I want to show you something.
I don't see anything. Where
Okay,
is it?
right.
Where is it?
You're not going to see anything on Hickory Street
Oh, so
because
it's on
we
Willow.
specifically did not want that on Hickory Street because you've got so much activity going on right there already. But we have allowed for it on this backside,
Oh, it's
which
on the
really
back end, Willow
faces
side.
sort of
Okay.
more the riverside and connects you to Willow.
Okay.
That's where we would envision both the climbing wall and opportunity for a retail spot, specifically for a bike shop. I made sure. And some tried to take that out, just so you know, and I said no.
we have this vision for this whole area to make it kind of an entertainment,
perfect for back
recreational
there, yeah.
center and get that
Entertainment,
connectivity from
recreational.
downtown through the arena and down to the river and to the Firefly. And it's just essential that we make it a pedestrian-friendly, lively streetscape. I mean, and I wouldn't be opposed to having some kind of commercial on the Hickory Street side too, because you're going to have some pedestrian activity there. You already have a lot of residential, and we're going to get more. So it would be nice if you could fit a small retail that could accommodate a coffee shop. I don't know how many times I've ended up at the bus station and been like, God, I
Where's
could
the
really use a
coffee?
drink right now.
I think I have a better spot for the coffee shop, but.
So I'm glad to see that that's there in the back. I didn't translate.
In fact, it was taken out of the agenda item, and I asked that it be put back in.
Thank
So,
you. And I'm not going to be here for all of the agenda setting meeting because I'll be at the Classic
I
Center at the
promise you,
B-52s concert.
I promise you I'll
So-
have that in there.
Okay, well, I'll be scouring that agenda item and be in touch if I have any more questions.
No worries.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Denson.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And I do agree with the design here for the parking deck. I think it makes sense. I would, as I've brought up a lot of times, the rooftop part, because I know one place it says passive green space or office space. Definitely push for the passive green space. I've been saying it over, and I think part of this is also we're talking about the flow to the parking deck, have everybody get stuck in there. If it's office space there, I mean that's something that the public's really gonna ever utilize, especially during. But if there's green space, you're gonna have a lot of people who are gonna be leaving an event who go into that space to linger, to lounge around and stuff, rather than get in their car immediately and leaving. I think it actually would slow down possibly as people exited the events, and it'll possibly bring some benefit to it. And also I think it brings some direct public benefit to this area that everybody could utilize, not just the owners or operators of the business or the customers of the business. I think everything here looks good. As complicated as can be, as always, but I like the way it's moving. And then I'll just throw out one little thing adjacent to this, which I know we brought up during the. I get confused with the different groups. I think the property committee presentation. Is I'd love for this body and the county to consider. We were talking about pedestrian access and the car access. That I really feel like the other direction going towards downtown is going to be where a lot of pedestrians and stuff are going to be leaving. I really want us to consider closing Foundry Street in between the parking deck and Dougherty.
Closing it? Like,
making it pedestrian only.
oh, so it'll be open, but just no cars?
Yes.
Okay.
It wouldn't be utilized as a street there. Yeah.
For people?
It'll be people. Because, I mean, obviously the main use there is people exiting the Classic Center. We have some shops that are there. But I think it's going to be safer for pedestrians leaving and going back and forth. So I'd love us to be considering that as we're discussing things moving forward.
What portion of the road, Commissioner?
North of the parking deck entrance on Foundry Street, and then south of where Dougherty comes in. Why are you shaking your head?
Well,
I'm shaking my head because as a automobile and bicycle rider, it's getting very crowded, and that is a way that those of us who are coming from the east side now use to.
Oh, you're using it as a cut through, right?
Yes, I am.
Oh, yeah, it's very dangerous to do that if we're going to be encouraging so much pedestrian, thousands and thousands of more pedestrians to be cutting through there.
It is dangerous.
Well, let me offer this. I know that when you terminate a road, then you have to build at least a hammerhead or a cul-de-sac so that emergency vehicles can get in and
Yeah,
out.
definitely.
So that's part of it. And then for a portion of the Foundry Street, as you come in from East Broad, there are entrances off the parking deck that is there that we would need to maintain.
Right.
And then
I'm
really,
saying above
North of that, yeah.
North of that. Yeah, it
Yeah.
totally makes sense that you bring in for the parking deck, but I mean, everything, the plans, I know everything's not here yet, but talking about, there's the one slide where you have the condos, and we're talking about this retail that's coming in. I mean, that whole area, we're talking about completely reforming in a way I think is very exciting and really and engaging it in a different way, especially for pedestrians. I think that our infrastructure should recognize that. And it's a really use, yeah.
My staff will love the idea that you said to close Foundry Street. They're always asking about that. But on the other hand, I think it's only fair to say that whenever we have requested it to be closed for activities, large conventions that are using both sides of the street,
Right.
Clark County's been very accommodating in that way, and we close it for 3 or 4 days and then open it back up again. So. Just for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, and I just feel like the direction we're going here is that there will be constant access going on there with shops, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, appreciate it.
Commissioner Edwards?
Thank you. I echo Commissioner Denson's wisdom in removing active vehicular traffic from this area where we're bringing so many people, children, elderly, folks with mobility issues, let's make it safe for them to get into our beautiful arena. We're spending $25 million to store some cars here. So we're making some accommodations for vehicles, right, Paul?
Yes.
We're doing a hell of a lot for cars right here, $25 million worth. And it's amazing how rapidly we're doing it, babe. I mean, this thing is going, isn't it? I mean, we're getting it done, aren't we?
Well, yes, sir.
25 minutes, yeah. So maybe we slice off a little piece for the people who are going to need to be walking in this area to go to the arena. I think it's a great idea.
We'd still allow bikes to cut through. That'd be fun.
Great.
Any more comments, questions? Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
We do need one, according to Clerk Spratler.
Okay, so move.
Second.
To adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously passes, and we are adjourned.
We have adjourned our quorumless meeting.